When a woman hides a crime boss's daughter for 4 years, only to be discovered right in his mansion. Evelyn Vale thought she could hide forever behind her maid uniform and a fake name. 6 months working undercover in the mansion of Lucien Ashford, Chicago's most feared crime boss, no one noticed her. Until her 4-year-old daughter dropped a stuffed rabbit right in front of him. One glance into the child's stormy blue eyes, and Lucien knew instantly it was his daughter. Follow this story to the end. Like and comment the city you're viewing to let me know how far the story has progressed. The rain started just after midnight, coming down in sheets so thick the Chicago skyline disappeared behind walls of water. Evelyn Vale stood at the third-floor window of the Ashford estate, watching lightning crack the sky open while her hands trembled against the glass. 6 months. She'd survived 6 months in this house without being seen, without being known. But survival required more than just staying quiet. It required becoming invisible in a place where every surface reflected secrets back at you. The marble floors she polished each morning held the ghosts of conversations she shouldn't have heard. The Persian rugs she vacuumed carried bloodstains someone had tried very hard to remove. The crystal glasses she washed bore fingerprints of men whose names appeared in newspaper headlines about missing persons and unsolved crimes. Evelyn had learned to keep her eyes down, to move through rooms like smoke, to exist without existing, because Lucien Ashford noticed everything. She'd watched him from careful distances over these months, the way he moved through his empire with the precision of a surgeon and the coldness of winter itself. He remembered every face that entered his domain, every name, every detail that might matter later when decisions needed to be made about loyalty and consequence. The other staff whispered about him in the kitchen after he left for his downtown office, about the warehouse on the south side where problems got solved, about the police commissioner who stopped asking questions after his daughter's college debt vanished overnight, about the way Lucien could smile at a charity gala while men died in basements across the city on his orders. Evelyn knew these things were true because she'd seen the proof 5 years ago, before she ran, before Isla, before everything changed. Thunder rolled across Lake Michigan and shook the windows hard enough to rattle her teeth. Evelyn pressed her forehead against the cold glass and tried to remember how to breathe. 4 more months. She just needed 4 more months to save enough money to disappear properly this time. Somewhere Lucien's reach couldn't find them. Somewhere his network of informants and corrupt officials and criminal partnerships couldn't track a single mother and her daughter. Somewhere that didn't exist anymore in a world where men like Lucien Ashford owned more than just property and politicians. Mama? Evelyn spun around. Isla stood in the doorway of their small bedroom, clutching her stuffed rabbit against her chest. Her dark curls tangled around her face, and her storm blue eyes, his eyes, always his eyes, were wide with fear. "The thunder's too loud," Isla whispered. Evelyn's heart cracked open, the way it did every time she looked at her daughter, and saw the man she'd loved before discovering the monster underneath. She crossed the room and scooped Isla into her arms, breathing in the scent of lavender shampoo and childhood innocence. "It's just noise, baby. It can't hurt you." "But it's angry noise." "I know, but we're safe here. Safe." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. They weren't safe. They'd never been safe. Not in this house. Not in this city. Not anywhere Lucien's shadow could reach. But Isla didn't need to know that yet. Didn't need to understand that her mother had spent 4 years running from a man who had the resources to find anyone, anywhere, if he wanted to badly enough. Evelyn carried Isla back to their narrow bed and tucked the blankets around her small body. The room they shared was modest compared to the rest of the estate. Just a bedroom and bathroom in the staff quarters on the 3rd floor. But it had a lock on the door. A window that faced the gardens instead of the street, a place where Evelyn could pretend they were just normal people living a normal life. "Tell me the story about the rabbit princess," Isla murmured, her eyes already starting to close. Evelyn stroked her daughter's hair and began the familiar tale. A princess who could talk to animals. A kingdom threatened by darkness. A brave rabbit who saved everyone with cleverness instead of swords. Isla loved that story, loved the idea that being small and soft didn't mean being powerless. Evelyn wished she believed it too. She stayed beside Isla until sleep claimed her daughter completely, then slipped back to the window. The storm hadn't lessened. If anything, it had grown worse. Wind howling through the estate's ancient trees and rain hammering the roof with enough force to drown out thought. Movement caught her eye in the gardens below. Lucien stood beneath the covered terrace, phone pressed to his ear, his suit jacket soaked through despite the stone overhang. Even from 3 floors up, Evelyn could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his free hand clenched and released in a rhythm that meant someone was about to have a very bad night. She should look away, should go to bed and pretend she hadn't seen anything. But her feet stayed frozen to the floor as Lucien ended the call and stood motionless in the rain, staring out at the flooded gardens like a king surveying a battlefield. Lightning illuminated his face for half a second. Sharp cheekbones, dark eyes that missed nothing, a mouth carved from stone and fury. He was beautiful in the way that dangerous things often were. Polished, controlled, lethal. Evelyn had loved him once, before she understood what that beauty cost. She finally forced herself away from the window and climbed into bed beside Isla. Sleep came slowly, dragged down by memories she'd spent 5 years trying to bury. Morning arrived with weak sunlight and the smell of coffee drifting up from the kitchen. Evelyn woke before Isla, dressed quickly in her standard uniform. Black dress, white apron, comfortable shoes that didn't make noise on marble floors. She braided her hair back tight enough to hurt and checked her reflection in the small bathroom mirror. Emily Valdez stared back at her. That's who she was now. Emily Valdez from Indianapolis, hired 6 months ago to help manage the housekeeping for the Ashford estate's 23 rooms. No connection to Evelyn Vale, no history with Lucien, just another invisible worker keeping the machinery of wealth running smoothly. She left Isla sleeping and headed downstairs. The morning routine never changed: start the coffee in the main kitchen, collect yesterday's linens from the second-floor bedrooms, begin the first round of dusting in the formal dining room. Predictable. Controllable. Safe. Mrs. Chen, the head housekeeper, was already in the kitchen when Evelyn arrived. The older woman moved with the efficiency of someone who'd spent 40 years managing households for people who demanded perfection and paid enough to receive it. "Mr. Ashford's breakfast in 30 minutes, Mrs. Chen said without looking up from her clipboard. "He's got meetings downtown all day, so make sure the study's spotless. He was working in there until 3 this morning." "Yes, ma'am." "And Emily—" Mrs. Chen finally met her eyes. "He was asking about you yesterday." Evelyn's blood turned to ice. "Asking what?" "How long you've been here, where you worked before, whether you're reliable." Mrs. Chen's expression was impossible to read. "I told him you were one of the best we've had, that you keep to yourself and do good work." "Did he say why he was asking?" "Mr. Ashford never explains himself." Mrs. Chen returned to her clipboard. "Just do your job and there won't be any problems." Evelyn nodded and escaped to the dining room before her hands started shaking too obviously. 6 months without drawing attention, 6 months of being invisible, and now Lucien was asking questions. She attacked the dining room with more force than necessary, polishing the mahogany table until her reflection stared back at her from the wood. The chandelier overhead caught morning light and scattered it across walls decorated with oil paintings worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. Everything in this house was beautiful and expensive and completely soulless, like the man who owned it. Evelyn was working on the built-in china cabinet when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavy, confident, moving with the kind of purpose that made smart people get out of the way. She kept her eyes on the crystal glasses she was arranging, willing herself to become part of the furniture, just another piece of the estate's carefully maintained perfection. The footsteps stopped in the doorway. "Emily Valdez." His voice cut through the air like a blade, smooth and cold and carrying the weight of authority that didn't need to be loud. Evelyn's hand stilled on the glass she was holding. She took a breath. Another. Then turned to face the man she'd spent 5 years running from. Lucien Ashford stood in the doorway of his dining room like he owned not just the house, but the air inside it. 6'2", tailored suit that probably cost more than her car. Dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on magazine covers, if those magazines featured men who could ruin your life with a phone call. His eyes met hers, and Evelyn's world narrowed to that single point of contact. Did he recognize her? Had he known all along? Was this the moment everything fell apart? But Lucien's expression remained perfectly neutral, professional. The way a boss looked at an employee he barely registered. Mrs. Chen tells me you've been doing excellent work, he said. Thank you, sir. Evelyn's voice came out steady. That was good. I'm happy to be here. How long have you been with us? 6 months, sir. And before that? Housekeeping at a hotel in Indianapolis, the Meridian. She'd practiced this story so many times it felt real. 5 years there before relocating to Chicago. Lucien stepped into the room, and Evelyn's instinct screamed at her to move backward, to put distance between them. But she held her ground, kept her face calm, let Emily Valdez exist in the space where Evelyn Vale used to be. What brought you to Chicago? Lucien asked. Fresh start, sir. Better opportunities. And you're here alone? No family? The question landed like a punch. Evelyn felt her fingers tighten on the crystal glass until it was a miracle it didn't shatter. I have a daughter, she said carefully. She's 4. We live on site in the staff quarters. Something flickered behind Lucien's eyes. Too fast to identify. There and gone in a heartbeat. Mrs. Chen didn't mention that in your file. She knows. It's never been a problem. My daughter's very quiet. What's her name? Evelyn's throat closed. This was dangerous territory. Too personal. Too close to the truth that could destroy everything. Isla, she said, because lying about her daughter's name felt like a betrayal worse than all the others. Lucien was quiet for a moment. His gaze moved over Evelyn's face with the kind of attention that made her feel stripped down to bone and blood. Then he nodded once. Make sure your work doesn't suffer because of childcare issues, he said. I pay for reliability. Yes, sir. It won't be a problem. Lucien turned and walked out without another word. Evelyn stood frozen in the dining room, her heart trying to punch through her ribs. She listened to his footsteps fade down the hallway, heard the front door open and close, heard the engine of his car start up and pull away. Only then did she let herself collapse against the china cabinet. He didn't recognize her. After 5 years, her hair was different, darker, shorter, always braided back instead of loose around her shoulders. She'd lost weight, gained harder edges, learned to carry herself like someone who expected nothing and wanted less. She wasn't the girl he'd known, the art student who'd stumbled into his life at a gallery opening and somehow made him laugh, the woman he'd taken to private dinners and expensive hotels and introduced to a world that seemed glamorous until she saw the blood underneath. That girl was gone. Emily Valdez had taken her place. But even Emily couldn't stop her hands from shaking. Bob. Isla woke up demanding pancakes and stories about the thunder from last night. Evelyn made breakfast in their small kitchenette, while her daughter chattered about a dream involving talking rabbits and flying horses. Normal 4-year-old chaos, the kind of beautiful, messy noise that made life worth living. Can I play in the gardens today? Isla asked around a mouthful of pancake. Not today, baby. Too muddy from the rain. But I want to see the fish in the pond. Tomorrow if it's sunny, I promise. Isla pouted, but didn't push. She'd learned early that when Mama said no, it meant no. That some rules existed for reasons that couldn't be explained yet. Evelyn spent the morning keeping Isla quietly entertained in their room, while she worked through the mental checklist of everything that still needed to be done before Lucien returned home. The study, the second-floor hallway, the master bedroom that she normally avoided because touching his things felt like inviting disaster. By afternoon, she couldn't avoid it anymore. Mrs. Chen expected the bedroom done before evening, and Evelyn had run out of excuses to delay. She left Isla with a coloring book and strict instructions not to leave the room, then headed to the master suite on the second floor. Lucien's bedroom was exactly what she expected, massive, immaculate, decorated in shades of gray and black that matched his soul. The bed was made with military precision, no clothes thrown over chairs, no personal items scattered across surfaces, everything controlled, everything in its place. Evelyn worked quickly, changing the sheets and dusting the furniture with the efficiency of someone who wanted to finish and get out. But when she opened the drawer of the nightstand to check if it needed organizing, she froze. A photograph lay face up inside. It was her, not Emily Valdez. Her, Evelyn Vale at 23, laughing at something outside the camera's frame, her hair catching sunlight in the gallery where they'd first met. She was wearing a blue dress she'd loved and lost years ago, looking at the camera, at Lucien behind it, like he was the center of the universe. Evelyn picked up the photograph with numb fingers. He'd kept it. 5 years after she disappeared. 5 years of silence and distance and carefully constructed new identities. And he'd kept her picture in his nightstand like a wound he wouldn't let heal. The bedroom door opened behind her. Find something interesting? Evelyn spun around. Lucien stood in the doorway, still wearing his suit from this morning, but with his tie loosened and jacket gone. His eyes went from her face to the photograph in her hand to her face again. The air in the room turned sharp enough to cut. I'm sorry, Evelyn stammered, defaulting to Emily Valdez's voice. The drawer was open. I didn't mean... Who are you? The question was soft, lethal. Emily Valdez. I work here. I'm the housekeeper. Try again. Lucien crossed the room in 3 strides and plucked the photograph from her frozen fingers. He held it up beside her face, comparing the woman in the picture to the woman standing in front of him. Evelyn watched recognition dawn across his features, watched 5 years of searching and fury and something darker she couldn't name settle into his expression like snow turning to ice. Evelyn. Her real name sounded like a curse in his mouth. You changed your hair, lost weight, got good at pretending to be invisible. He set the photograph down on the nightstand with careful precision. But you can't change your eyes. I'd know those eyes anywhere. Evelyn's mind raced through exit strategies. The door was blocked. The window was too high. Lucien was between her and any possible escape. I can explain. You disappeared 5 years ago without a word, without a note, without a goddamn trace. Lucien's voice stayed calm, but underneath it lived something volcanic. I searched for you, spent 2 years turning over every rock in every city. Then you show up here using a fake name, working in my house, hiding in plain sight. He took a step closer. So yes, Evelyn, I'd love to hear you explain. Before she could answer, a small voice called from the hallway. Mama? Evelyn's heart stopped. No. Not now. Isla appeared in the bedroom doorway, clutching her stuffed rabbit and looking confused about why her mother was in this unfamiliar part of the house. Her storm blue eyes, his eyes, went from Evelyn to Lucien and back again. Who's that? Isla asked. The silence that followed could have drowned civilizations. Evelyn watched Lucien's gaze move from Isla's face to hers, watched him do the math that didn't require a calculator, watched the exact moment he understood what she'd taken from him 5 years ago. Not just herself, their daughter. Lucien stared at Isla like she was a ghost given flesh. The color drained from his face. His hands opened and closed at his sides. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely human. How old is she? Evelyn couldn't make her mouth work, couldn't force words past the terror closing her throat. Evelyn, how old is she? 4. The word came out broken. She just turned 4. Isla, oblivious to the bomb that had just detonated in the middle of her life, walked further into the room and looked up at Lucien with innocent curiosity. I'm Isla, she said. What's your name? Lucien dropped to one knee, slowly, like his legs wouldn't hold him anymore. He was eye level with his daughter now, staring at this small person who carried his face and blood and legacy without knowing any of it. Lucien, he said quietly. My name is Lucien. Isla smiled. That's a fancy name. Is it? Mama says fancy names are for fancy people. Your mama's a smart woman. Lucien's eyes never left Isla's face. He reached out like he wanted to touch her, but didn't trust himself. Did you drop something, Isla? Isla looked down at her rabbit, confused. No? I just thought... Lucien stopped, swallowed. You should hold on to that. It looks important. Mr. Rabbit goes everywhere with me. Isla held up the stuffed toy. Mama says he's brave. I'm sure he is. Evelyn watched this exchange like an observer at her own execution. This was it. The moment everything ended, Lucien would call his lawyers, his security, would take Isla away with the full force of his money and power and connections, would destroy Emily Valdez and Evelyn Vale and whoever else she tried to become because you didn't steal from Lucien Ashford and walk away clean. But Lucien just kept staring at Isla like she was the only thing in the room that mattered. Why don't you go back to your room, baby? Evelyn managed to say. Mama needs to talk to Mr. Ashford. But I'm hungry. Isla, now. Something in her mother's voice made Isla's smile falter. She backed toward the door, clutching her rabbit tighter. Lucien watched her go with an expression that might have been grief if men like him allowed themselves that weakness. The door closed. Silence crashed back down. Lucien rose to his feet, turned to face Evelyn, and the fury that lived in his eyes was so absolute she actually took a step backward, even though there was nowhere to run. 4 years, he said softly. You kept my daughter from me for 4 years. I didn't have a choice. You had every choice. The explosion came fast and lethal. You chose to run. You chose to hide. You chose to let me believe you were dead or worse while you were raising my child with a new name and a life I wasn't part of. You want to talk about choices? Evelyn's fear turned to fury. I saw what you did. I saw you in that warehouse, saw the man you had chained to the floor, saw what you let them do to him. That's the choice I made, Lucien. I chose not to raise a daughter around a monster. The words hit harder than any physical blow. Lucien's jaw worked. His hands clenched into fists. For a second, Evelyn thought he might actually hit her. But he just stood there breathing hard, looking at her like she'd shot him in the chest. You don't know what you saw, he said finally. I know enough. Do you? Lucien moved closer and Evelyn forced herself not to flinch. Do you know what that man did? The girls he trafficked? The lives he destroyed? Or did you just see blood and assume I was the villain? Evelyn's certainty wavered. What are you talking about? That man you saw me punish was running underage girls across state lines, selling them to the highest bidder. I found out. I stopped him. And yes, I made sure he understood what happens to people who commit those particular sins in my city. Lucien's voice was cold steel. So forgive me if I don't apologize for the monster you think I am. The ground shifted under Evelyn's feet. 5 years of righteous certainty cracked open. She'd built her entire escape on that night. On the proof that Lucien was exactly what the rumors said, brutal, violent, irredeemable. But what if she'd been wrong? Even if that's true, she started, it is true. And you didn't stay long enough to ask. Didn't trust me enough to wait for an explanation. You just ran. Lucien's voice dropped to something dangerous, and took the most important thing I'll ever have. I was protecting her. From what? Her father? Lucien laughed, but there was no humor in it. You know what I've been doing for the past 3 years, Evelyn? After I finally found you in Indianapolis with a baby I didn't know existed, I watched from a distance, made sure you were safe, made sure no one from my world could touch you. And when you needed a job and money was tight, I created the opening here, put your application at the top of the pile, brought you somewhere I could keep you protected. Evelyn's mind was spinning. You knew this whole time? I knew. Then why didn't you? Because I wanted you to tell me yourself. The pain in his voice was naked and raw. I wanted you to trust me enough to admit the truth, to bring our daughter to me instead of hiding her like something shameful. I gave you 6 months to do the right thing, Evelyn, and you never did. The accusation landed like a physical blow. Evelyn had no defense because he was right. She'd had 6 months to tell him, 6 months to explain, to ask for the truth she'd never waited to hear 5 years ago. And she'd stayed silent because staying silent was safer than risking everything. What happens now? She whispered. Lucien looked at her for a long moment. His fury was still there, but underneath it lived something more complicated, something that looked almost like grief. Now? He moved to the door. Now you're going to stay exactly where you are, in this house, with our daughter, and we're going to figure out what being a family looks like. You can't just... I can do anything I want, Evelyn. Remember? He paused in the doorway. But what I want is for my daughter to know her father. So that's what's going to happen, whether you like it or not. He left without waiting for a response. Evelyn stood alone in the master bedroom, surrounded by wealth and power and the ruins of every plan she'd made. Outside the window, storm clouds were gathering again over Lake Michigan. The thunder was coming back, and this time, Evelyn knew it would be loud enough to drown everything. Evelyn didn't sleep that night. She lay beside Isla in their narrow bed and listened to her daughter's soft breathing while her mind replayed the confrontation in Lucy's bedroom over and over until the words lost meaning and became just noise. He knew. He'd always known. Every smile from Mrs. Chen, every paycheck deposited into her account, every moment of false security she'd built over 6 months, all of it orchestrated by a man who moved people around like pieces on a chessboard. The worst part wasn't the manipulation. It was that some buried part of her had wanted to tell him from the beginning, had wanted to watch Lucien meet his daughter and see if the monster she remembered could find something human underneath all that control and violence. But wanting things was dangerous. Wanting things from Lucien Ashford was suicide. Dawn came gray and cold. Evelyn extracted herself from Isla's octopus grip and stood at the window, watching fog roll in from the lake and swallow the gardens whole. The estate looked like something from a Gothic novel, all stone and shadow and secrets that wouldn't stay buried. A knock on the door made her jump. "Miss Valdez!" Mrs. Chen's voice carried through the wood. "Mr. Ashford would like to see you in his study. Now." Evelyn pressed her forehead against the window and tried to remember how to breathe. "I'll be down in 10 minutes. He said now." Of course he did. Because Lucien didn't ask. He commanded. And people who worked for him learned quickly that defiance had consequences. Evelyn checked on Isla, still sleeping, still innocent, still unaware that her entire world had shifted overnight, then smoothed down her uniform and headed downstairs. The study was on the first floor, tucked behind the library in a part of the house guests never saw. Evelyn had cleaned it exactly twice in 6 months, both times under Mrs. Chen's watchful supervision. It was Lucien's private domain, where he conducted business that didn't happen in boardrooms or appear in public records. She knocked once. "Come in." Lucien sat behind a massive oak desk that probably cost more than a car. He'd changed from yesterday's suit into dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, exposing forearms corded with muscle and marked with a scar she remembered tracing with her fingers once upon a time. His hair was still wet from a shower. His jaw was tight with exhaustion that said he hadn't slept either. "Close the door," he said without looking up from whatever paperwork held his attention. Evelyn closed it, stood there, waited. Lucien signed something with quick, aggressive strokes, then finally raised his eyes to meet hers. The fury from yesterday had cooled into something harder, more controlled, somehow worse. "Sit down." "I'd rather stand." "I don't care what you'd rather do. Sit." Evelyn sat in one of the leather chairs facing the desk. Her hands wanted to shake, so she folded them in her lap and focused on keeping her spine straight. Emily Valdez wouldn't show weakness. Evelyn Vale had run from this man once. But whoever she was now, caught between two identities and drowning in consequences, she needed to hold her ground. Lucien leaned back in his chair and studied her with the kind of attention that made her feel dissected. "We're going to establish some rules." "Rules. You're not leaving this house. Not without my permission. Not with Isla. Not alone. You try to run again, and I will find you in less than 12 hours. Are we clear?" The words should have terrified her. Instead, they just made her tired. "Crystal." "Good. Second, you're going to tell Isla who I am, that I'm her father. I don't care how you phrase it or what story you construct, but she's going to know the truth by the end of this week. She's 4 years old, Lucien. She doesn't understand." "Then make her understand." His voice cut like a knife. "You've had 4 years to be her only parent. That ends now." Evelyn's nails dug into her palms. "And if I refuse?" Lucien's smile was cold enough to frost glass. "Then I call my lawyers and we do this the legal way. I have documentation proving you've been using a false identity, that you fled across state lines with my child without consent, that you committed fraud on your employment application here. I can bury you in court proceedings, in criminal charges, and make sure you never see Isla again except through supervised visitation." He paused. "Or you can cooperate. Your choice." The threat landed exactly as intended. Evelyn felt her certainty crumble. She'd known this moment was coming from the second Isla walked into that bedroom. Known Lucien wouldn't let this go. Wouldn't accept half measures or compromises, but hearing it stated so plainly still felt like drowning. "You'd do that," she said quietly. "You'd actually take her from me. In a heartbeat. No hesitation, no remorse. But I'd rather not. Because despite everything, Evelyn, I don't think you're a bad mother. Misguided, stubborn, too quick to run instead of fight. But not bad." Lucien's expression softened by a fraction. "So I'm offering you a deal. Stay. Let me be part of her life. Let us figure out how to do this without lawyers and courts and custody battles that traumatize everyone involved. And what do I get in return? You get to keep being her mother. You get security, protection, everything this house can provide. His eyes held hers. And you get me trying very hard not to hate you for what you stole. The honesty in that last sentence hit harder than the threats. Evelyn saw the wound beneath Lucien's control, the 4 years of birthday parties he'd missed, first words he'd never heard, nights comforting a daughter who didn't know he existed. She'd done that to him, justified it with fear and self-righteousness, convinced herself she was protecting Isla when maybe, she'd just been protecting herself from having to face the complicated truth about who Lucien actually was. Okay, Evelyn heard herself say, we do this your way, but I have conditions too. Lucien raised an eyebrow. You're not exactly in a position to negotiate. If you want Isla to accept you, she needs to see us working together, not fighting, not threatening each other. Evelyn leaned forward. So whatever rage you're carrying, whatever punishment you think I deserve, you bury it. Around her, we're civil, we're cooperative, we're adults who can put a child's needs above our own damage. Lucien considered this. And when she's not around, then we can hate each other all you want. A ghost of something that might have been amusement crossed his face. Fair enough. Anything else? Your world doesn't touch her. The criminal enterprise, the violence, whatever you do in those warehouses and basement rooms, Isla never sees it, never knows about it. She gets to be a normal kid for as long as possible. Define normal. School, friends, playing in gardens without armed guards watching her every move. Evelyn's voice turned sharp. She doesn't become a pawn in whatever power games you play with your enemies. Lucien was quiet for a long moment. His fingers drummed against the desk in a rhythm that betrayed the calculation happening behind his eyes. I can protect her better if she understands the reality of who I am. She's 4, and she's my daughter in a world where people would use that information to hurt me. Lucien stood and moved to the window, his back to Evelyn. You want normal for her. I want her alive. Those things don't always align. The truth in that statement settled over the room like ash. Evelyn joined him at the window, maintaining careful distance. Outside, the fog was starting to lift, revealing the estate's grounds in pieces, the pool, the gardens, the high stone walls that kept the world at bay. Then we find a middle ground, she said. We give her as much normal as we can while keeping her safe. But she doesn't grow up afraid, Lucien. She doesn't learn to see violence as the answer to every problem. Is that what you think I'll teach her? I think you'll teach her what you know. And what you know is how to break people who get in your way. Lucien turned to face her, and the look in his eyes was complicated enough to drown in. Anger and pain and something older. Something that reached back 5 years to gallery openings and private dinners and a version of themselves that didn't exist anymore. I loved you, he said quietly, before you ran, before all of this. I loved you enough to imagine a different life, one where I could walk away from the empire and just be someone normal, with you. Evelyn's throat tightened. I know. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you never believed that was possible, never trusted me enough to think I could be anything other than the monster. You had a man chained to a floor, Lucien. His face was hamburger. His hands were broken. What was I supposed to think? You were supposed to trust me! The explosion came fast. You were supposed to wait 5 goddamn minutes for an explanation instead of running like I was the devil himself. I was pregnant and terrified. You think I wouldn't have protected you? Wouldn't have moved heaven and earth to keep you safe? Lucien's voice cracked. Instead, you disappeared, made me think you were dead, made me imagine every horrible thing that could happen to someone He stopped, swallowed. You destroyed me, Evelyn, and then you kept destroying me every day for 4 years by keeping my daughter hidden like some shameful secret. The rawness in his confession left no room for defenses. Evelyn felt tears burning behind her eyes, but refused to let them fall. She didn't get to cry, didn't get to play victim when she'd been the one who ran. I'm sorry, she whispered. For what it's worth. I'm sorry. Lucien looked at her for a long moment, then turned back to the window. Sorry doesn't give me back 4 years. I know. They stood in silence while the fog continued to lift and reality settled into its new shape. There was no going back, no one doing the damage. They could only move forward into whatever messy, complicated arrangement would let them both be part of Isla's life. "When do you want to tell her?" Evelyn asked finally. "Today. This afternoon. I'm clearing my schedule." "That's too fast. I've waited long enough." Lucien's tone left no room for argument. "We tell her together. We make it clear I'm staying in her life, and then we start figuring out what this looks like." Evelyn wanted to protest, wanted to demand more time to prepare. But looking at Lucien's profile against the gray light, she saw the fear underneath his control. He was terrified she'd find another way to run, another identity to hide behind, another city where he couldn't find them. And maybe he had reason to be. "Okay," she said. "This afternoon." Isla was eating cereal and watching cartoons when Evelyn returned to their room. She looked up with milk on her upper lip and smiled like yesterday hadn't detonated her mother's entire world. "Is it sunny enough for the fish pond?" she asked hopefully. Evelyn sat beside her daughter on the small couch and tried to figure out how to explain something that didn't have words a 4-year-old could understand. "Not yet, baby, but I need to talk to you about something important." Isla's smile faded. Kids always knew when important meant scary. "Did I do something wrong?" "No, you're perfect." Evelyn pulled Isla into her lap. "Remember yesterday when you came to find me and met the man in the big bedroom? Mr. Lucien, with the fancy name?" "Yes, him." Evelyn took a breath. "He wants to spend some time with you today. Get to know you better." "Why?" "Because, how did you explain this? How did you tell a 4-year-old that the father she'd never known suddenly wanted to be part of her life?" "Because he's a very important person and he thinks you're special." Isla considered this with the seriousness children brought to important matters. "Does he like rabbits?" "I don't know, sweetheart. You can ask him." "Okay." Isla returned to her cereal like the conversation was already forgotten. Her world was still small enough that adults wanting to spend time with her wasn't strange, just another thing that happened in the inexplicable universe of grown-up decisions. Evelyn held her daughter close and tried not to think about how quickly that innocence would shatter. Lucien appeared at their door exactly at 2 o'clock. He'd changed into dark jeans and a navy sweater that made him look almost human, almost approachable. The kind of man you might see at a playground and think was just another dad instead of someone who could ruin lives with a phone call. He looked at Isla, and something in his expression went soft. "Hi, Isla." Isla clutched her rabbit and peered up at him with cautious curiosity. "Hi. I thought maybe we could spend some time together this afternoon. Would you like that?" Isla looked at Evelyn for permission. Evelyn nodded, even though every instinct screamed to grab her daughter and run. Again, always running. "What would we do?" Isla asked Lucien. "What do you like to do?" "I like stories and swimming and looking at the fish." "I know where there's a really good fish pond," Lucien said. "Want to see?" Isla's eyes lit up. "The one in the garden?" "That's the one." She slipped her small hand into Lucien's without hesitation, without fear, like she'd been waiting her whole life for someone exactly like him to show up. Evelyn watched her daughter's hand disappear into Lucien's and felt something crack open in her chest. This was happening. This was real. She couldn't stop it anymore. They walked through the estate together, a strange, broken family that didn't know how to fit its pieces together yet. Lucien led them through halls Evelyn had cleaned 100 times, out French doors into gardens that were starting to dry from yesterday's rain. The koi pond sat in the center of the formal garden, surrounded by stone benches and carefully manicured plants. Orange and white fish moved through the water like living paintings. Isla dropped to her knees at the edge and stared in wonder. "They're so pretty." "They're very old," Lucien said, kneeling beside her. "Some of them have been here longer than I've been alive." "Really? Really? My father built this pond before I was born." Isla looked up at him with those storm blue eyes that were identical to his own. "Where's your father now?" "He died a long time ago." "That's sad." "It was." Lucien's voice was carefully controlled. "But he taught me a lot before he left, about taking care of things that matter, about protecting what's important." Evelyn stood a few feet away, watching this interaction with her heart in her throat. Lucien was good with Isla, patient, present. Nothing like the cold, controlled man who'd threatened her in his study this morning. Maybe that was the thing she'd never understood about him, that he could be both. Monster and man, violent and gentle, capable of terrible things in service of the people he loved. "Do the fish have names?" Isla asked. "Not yet. Would you like to name them?" Isla's face split into a grin. "Can I?" "You can do anything you want." For the next 30 minutes, Evelyn watched her daughter name koi fish with the kind of creativity only a 4-year-old possessed. Mr. Whiskers, Princess Bubbles, Rocket Ship. Lucien listened to every name with complete seriousness, occasionally asking questions that made Isla giggle and elaborate on the complex backstories she was inventing. He was charming her, slowly, carefully, winning her over with attention and patience and the kind of focus that made you feel like the center of the universe. Evelyn had fallen for exactly that once. "Mama, look!" Isla pointed at a particularly large orange fish. "This one's name is Brave because he swims in front." "That's a perfect name," Evelyn managed. Isla grabbed Lucien's hand again. Can we feed them?" "I'll get the food." Lucien stood and looked at Evelyn. Their eyes met over Isla's head. She saw the question there. "Is this okay? Am I doing this right?" She nodded. He disappeared into the garden house and returned with fish food. Isla scattered it across the water with abandon, shrieking with delight when the koi surged to the surface. Lucien crouched beside her, pointing out different fish and telling her facts about koi that he probably shouldn't know, but somehow did. Evelyn sank onto one of the stone benches and watched her carefully constructed world rearrange itself into something new, something she couldn't control. The afternoon wore on. Isla's initial shyness evaporated under Lucien's steady attention. She showed him how Mr. Rabbit could hop, told him about her favorite cartoon, asked him why his house was so big. "Because I have a lot of rooms for important people," Lucien answered. "Am I important?" Lucien went very still. When he spoke again, his voice was rough around the edges. "You're the most important person I know." "More important than Mama?" "Different important, but yes." Isla processed this with 4-year-old logic. "Okay, can I see the big pool now?" They moved to the swimming pool on the south side of the estate. It was Olympic-sized, heated year-round, surrounded by loungers and changing cabanas that probably cost more than most people's houses. Isla pressed her face against the glass barrier and stared at the water with longing. "It's so big!" "Do you know how to swim?" Lucien asked. "Mama's teaching me, but we only practice in the bath." Lucien looked at Evelyn. "You never brought her to the pool?" "Staff aren't supposed to use the facilities." Something dark crossed his face. "That rule doesn't apply to you anymore. Bring her swimming whenever she wants." "I don't think—" "That wasn't a request, Evelyn." They stared at each other while Isla remained oblivious, still hypnotized by the massive pool. The power dynamic had shifted so completely that Evelyn felt like she was standing on quicksand. Everything she'd built over 6 months, boundaries, rules, careful separation between employee and employer, had evaporated. She wasn't staff anymore. She was the mother of Lucien's child, and that changed everything. "Can I go in?" Isla asked, turning to look up at them with pleading eyes. "Not today," Evelyn started. "Tomorrow," Lucien said simultaneously. Isla looked between them, sensing the conflict. "Tomorrow?" she repeated hopefully. Lucien knelt down to Isla's level again. "How about I teach you to swim properly in the big pool? Would you like that?" "Yes." "Then tomorrow afternoon, you and I will have swimming lessons, okay?" Isla threw her arms around Lucien's neck in a spontaneous hug that made him freeze like he'd been electrocuted. For a second, he didn't move, didn't breathe. Then his arms came up slowly and wrapped around his daughter with a careful tenderness that broke something in Evelyn's chest. When Isla pulled back, she was grinning. "You're nice. Can you stay for dinner?" Lucien's eyes went to Evelyn. She saw the hope there, the desperate want underneath all his control. "He's very busy," Evelyn said carefully. "I can make time," Lucien countered. "Yay!" Isla grabbed both their hands. "We can have spaghetti. Mama makes the best spaghetti." Evelyn opened her mouth to protest, to establish some boundary that would slow this train before it completely derailed. But looking at her daughter's joy, pure and uncomplicated and beautiful, she couldn't find the words. "Spaghetti it is," she heard herself say. Dinner was surreal. They ate in the staff kitchen instead of the formal dining room because Isla insisted she wanted to eat where she always ate. Lucien sat at their small table, looking completely out of place in his expensive clothes, eating spaghetti that Evelyn had thrown together from pantry staples. Isla talked nonstop about her favorite books, about a dream she'd had with flying horses, about how Mr. Rabbit needed a friend rabbit because being alone was sad. Lucien listened to all of it like she was revealing secrets of the universe. "You should get a pet," Isla announced. "Pets make people happy." "I'll keep that in mind," Lucien said seriously. "Mama won't let me have a dog because apartments don't allow them, but we don't live in an apartment anymore, so maybe now I can have one?" She looked at Evelyn with such hope that saying no felt cruel. But Evelyn also knew what getting a dog meant. Roots, permanence, commitment to staying in this place with this man. "We'll talk about it," Evelyn said. "That means no," Isla told Lucien sadly. "Not necessarily," Lucien replied. His eyes found Evelyn's across the table. "Sometimes it just means we need time to figure things out." The weight in that statement had nothing to do with dogs. After dinner, Isla demanded a story. Lucien looked uncertain for the first time all day. "I'm not very good at stories," he admitted. "Everyone can tell stories." Isla grabbed his hand and dragged him toward the bedroom. "Come on!" Evelyn followed, feeling like an observer in her own life. They settled into the small bedroom, Isla in her bed, Lucien in the single chair that was too small for his frame, Evelyn hovering in the doorway. "Tell me about when you were little," Isla instructed. Lucien considered this. "When I was little, I lived in this same house." "Really?" "Really. And sometimes when storms came, I would climb up to the tower at the very top and watch the lightning over the lake." Isla's eyes went wide. "There's a tower?" "At the very top of the house. You can see the whole city from up there." "Can I see it?" "Someday." Lucien's voice went soft. "When you're bigger and the stairs won't be so scary." "I'm not scared of stairs." "Then maybe sooner than someday." Isla yawned, fighting sleep the way kids always did when something interesting was happening. "Will you come back tomorrow? For swimming?" "I promise." "And tell me more stories?" "As many as you want." Satisfied, Isla's eyes started to drift closed. She reached out and grabbed Lucien's hand, holding it like an anchor. "You're my favorite fancy person," she murmured. Lucien's expression shattered and rebuilt itself in the space of a heartbeat. He sat there holding his daughter's hand while she fell asleep, looking like someone had handed him the world and he didn't know what to do with it. Eventually, Isla's grip loosened. Her breathing evened out. Lucien carefully extracted his hand and stood, moving toward the door where Evelyn waited. They stepped into the hallway, closed the door quietly, stood in the narrow space looking at each other. "She's perfect," Lucien said quietly. "I know. You did that. Raised her to be brave and kind and full of light." His jaw worked. "I hate that I missed it, but I'm grateful you did it right." The admission cost him something. Evelyn could see it in the set of his shoulders, the way his hands clenched and released at his sides. "I should have told you," she said, "when I found out I was pregnant, before I ran. I should have given you the chance to..." "To what? Convince you I wasn't a monster?" Lucien's laugh was bitter. "You'd already decided who I was, Evelyn. Nothing I said would have changed your mind." "Maybe. Or maybe I was scared of what would happen if I stayed. If I let myself believe you could be both things, the man I loved and the criminal who hurt people." "I am both things. I've never pretended otherwise." "I know that now." Evelyn leaned against the wall. 5 years ago, I needed everything to be simple. Good or bad. Safe or dangerous. I couldn't handle the complexity of someone who was both. And now? Now I'm too tired to run anymore. So I guess we figure out how to make this work. Lucien studied her in the dim hallway light. "What changed? Between this morning, when you looked at me like I was the devil, and tonight?" Evelyn thought about that. About watching Lucien with Isla all afternoon, seeing him gentle and patient and completely devoted to a child he'd only just met. About the way he'd held their daughter like she was made of glass and gold. "You love her," she said simply. "I can see it. And whatever else you are, whatever terrible things you've done, you won't hurt her. That's enough for now." For now, Lucien repeated. He moved closer, and Evelyn's breath caught. They were inches apart in the narrow hallway, close enough that she could smell his cologne, see the flecks of silver in his dark eyes. Remember what it felt like to be this near to him when the world was younger and less broken. I meant what I said this morning, he said quietly. I loved you. Maybe still do, underneath all the rage and betrayal. But I don't trust you anymore, Evelyn. And I don't know if that can be fixed. The honesty in his words cut deeper than any threat, because she didn't trust him either. Didn't know if she could ever feel safe with a man who wielded power like a weapon and solved problems with violence. Then we're even, she whispered. Lucien's hand came up like he wanted to touch her face. His fingers stopped an inch from her cheek, hovering in the space between wanting and knowing better. Then he dropped his hand and stepped back. I should go. Early meetings tomorrow. Lucien. He was already walking away, moving down the hallway with quick strides that put distance between them. Evelyn watched him disappear around the corner, heard his footsteps fade on the stairs. Only then did she let herself slide down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, hugging her knees to her chest. Everything was changing too fast. The careful balance she'd maintained for 6 months was gone. She couldn't hide anymore. Couldn't pretend to be someone else. Couldn't protect Isla from the truth of who her father was. Tomorrow, Lucien would teach their daughter to swim, would continue weaving himself into Isla's life with the same calculated precision he brought to everything else. And Evelyn would watch it happen because she'd lost the right to stop it the moment she'd run 5 years ago. She sat in that hallway long after the house went quiet, long after the lights dimmed automatically on their timers, long after she should have been in bed, because tomorrow everything would shift again. And Evelyn had no idea if she'd survive the fall. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of new routines and shattered boundaries. Lucien kept his promise about swimming lessons. Every afternoon he appeared at the pool with Isla, patient and focused, teaching her to float and kick and blow bubbles underwater. Within 2 weeks, Isla was paddling across the shallow end with water wings, laughing and fearless. Evelyn watched from the pool deck, supposedly reading but actually tracking every interaction between father and daughter, looking for signs that Lucien would snap, that the monster would emerge and Isla would finally see what her mother had been protecting her from. But it never happened. Lucien was gentle with Isla, encouraging when she struggled, celebratory when she succeeded. He never raised his voice, never showed impatience, never let the darkness that lived in him touch their daughter. It was almost convincing. Higher! Push me higher! Isla shrieked from the swing set Lucien had installed in the gardens during week 2. Lucien pushed the swing, and Isla soared through the air, her laughter carrying across the estate grounds. He'd moved meetings, canceled appointments, restructured his entire schedule to be present for this. For her. Mrs. Chen stopped pretending Evelyn was regular staff. The other household employees treated her differently now, with deference, with curiosity, with the kind of careful respect people showed to someone connected to power. Evelyn hated it. She missed being invisible, missed the clarity of knowing exactly where she stood. Now everything was complicated. She lived in the estate's staff quarters, but ate dinner with Lucien and Isla most nights. She still technically worked for Mrs. Chen, but everyone knew she could override any decision if she wanted to. She was trapped in liminal space, not quite family, not quite employee. Something undefined and uncomfortable that made her skin itch. Late one night, unable to sleep, Evelyn found herself wandering the first floor. She ended up in Lucien's study, drawn by light under the door. She knocked softly. Come in. Lucien sat behind his desk, paper scattered everywhere, looking exhausted. He'd loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves. A glass of whiskey sat untouched at his elbow. Couldn't sleep? He asked. Apparently not. Evelyn hovered in the doorway. You're up late. Business doesn't stop just because I have a daughter now. He rubbed his eyes. Though it's getting harder to care about shipping contracts and real estate deals when I could be reading bedtime stories. The admission surprised her. Evelyn stepped into the room. She asks about you every morning. When is Lucien coming? What are we doing today? She calls me Lucien, not dad, not father. His voice carried an edge of pain. How long before that changes? I don't know. Kids need time to process big changes. We've had 3 weeks. That's nothing in a 4-year-old's timeline. Evelyn sat in the chair across from him. She trusts you, though. That's more important than what she calls you. Lucien looked at her, really looked at her. Do you trust me? The question hung between them like a knife. I trust you with Isla, Evelyn said carefully. Beyond that, I'm working on it. Fair enough. Lucien picked up his whiskey but didn't drink. I need to tell you something about why I brought you back here. Evelyn's stomach dropped. I thought you said you wanted to protect us. I did. I do. But there's more to it. He set the glass down hard enough to make her jump. 3 years ago, when I finally tracked you down in Indianapolis, I wasn't the only one looking. Someone else was asking questions about a woman who disappeared after being involved with me. Someone dangerous. The room went cold. Who? Alexei Volkov. He runs the Russian syndicate in Detroit. We've had territorial disputes for years. Lucien's jaw was tight. He somehow found out about you, about us, and he started hunting for information that could hurt me. Evelyn felt sick. What kind of information? The kind that makes you a target. You and anyone connected to you. Lucien's eyes were dark. When I realized he was getting close, I had to make a choice. Let him find you and Isla on your own in some Indianapolis apartment, or bring you here where I could control the security, where my people could watch every person who came within 100 yards of you. You're saying we were never safe in Indianapolis. You were never safe anywhere, not from the world I live in. Lucien stood and moved to the window. By bringing you here, I've made you safer, but I've also made you visible to anyone watching me. It's a calculated risk. You should have told me this 3 weeks ago. You would have run again, and this time I couldn't have kept you safe. He turned to face her. At least here, you're protected. The estate has security. My men watch the perimeter. No one gets near Isla without my knowledge. Evelyn's mind was racing. All this time she'd thought Lucien was being controlling, possessive, but he'd been protecting them from threats she didn't even know existed. What does Volkov want? She asked. What they all want. Leverage, power, a way to get to me. Lucien's voice was flat. If he discovers Isla is my daughter, she becomes the perfect weapon. The fear that crashed through Evelyn was primal, absolute. Then we need to leave. Hide somewhere he can't find us. There is nowhere he can't find you. Not without my protection. Lucien crossed to stand in front of her. This is the safest place for both of you, but you need to know the reality. Being connected to me makes you a target, always. Evelyn thought about Isla sleeping upstairs, innocent, unaware, living in a world that wasn't nearly as safe as she believed. What do we do? She whispered. We stay alert. We follow security protocols. And we trust that I've been keeping people safe from men like Volkov for a long time. Lucien's hand reached out and cupped her face before she could pull away. I won't let anything happen to her, Evelyn, or to you. That's a promise. His touch was warm, familiar. It brought back memories of before, when she'd believed promises from this man meant something, when love had seemed possible instead of dangerous. She should pull away, should maintain the distance that kept her safe from wanting things she couldn't have. But she was so tired of being afraid, so tired of running, so tired of carrying everything alone. Okay, she heard herself say, we stay. Lucien's thumb brushed across her cheek. His eyes searched hers for something she wasn't sure she could give. Then he stepped back, breaking the contact. Get some sleep. Tomorrow I'm taking Isla to the tower. She's been asking all week. The tower in the storm. It's clear tomorrow. No lightning. Safe. Evelyn nodded and left before she could do something stupid like ask him to make the fear go away. Like believe he could. She made it back to her room and locked the door behind her. Isla was sprawled across the bed, one arm flung over Mr. Rabbit, completely at peace. Evelyn stood there watching her daughter sleep and tried not to think about Russian mobsters and territorial disputes and the 1,000 ways being Lucien Ashford's daughter could get Isla killed, but the thoughts came anyway. And with them, the terrible certainty that she'd just made a choice there was no coming back from. They were staying, which meant whatever happened next, she'd have to face it instead of run. For the first time in 5 years, Evelyn Vale had nowhere left to hide. The tower room smelled like dust and old secrets. Evelyn followed Lucien and Isla up the narrow spiral staircase, her hand trailing along the cold stone wall as they climbed higher into the oldest part of the estate. Isla's excited chatter echoed off the ancient stones, her small feet taking the steps two at a time while Lucien stayed close enough to catch her if she stumbled. "How many more steps?" Isla asked for the third time. "Almost there," Lucien said, "just around this corner." They emerged into a circular room with windows on all sides. The view stole Evelyn's breath. Chicago sprawled out below them in every direction. Lake Michigan stretched to the east, gray and infinite. The downtown skyline cut into the western horizon like broken teeth. To the north and south, the city spread in a grid of streets and buildings that went on forever. "Whoa!" Isla breathed, pressing her face against the glass. "We're so high!" "Higher than the birds," Lucien agreed. He moved to stand beside her, pointing out landmarks. "See that tall building there? That's where I work sometimes. And that park is where people go to fly kites in the summer." Evelyn hung back, watching them. Father and daughter silhouetted against the city. Lucien's hand rested on Isla's shoulder with casual affection that still looked new. Unpracticed, like he was learning a language he'd never been taught. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and frowned at the unknown number on the screen. Probably spam. She started to dismiss it when a text message appeared. "You should ask Lucien about the warehouse fire last week, the one that killed 6 people. Then ask yourself if that's the kind of man who should be around your daughter." Evelyn's blood turned to ice. She read the message again, then again. Her hand started shaking. "Mama, look!" Isla called. "You can see everything from here." Evelyn forced her face into something resembling calm and moved to the window. "It's beautiful, baby." But her mind was racing. 6 people. A warehouse fire. Last week. She'd heard Mrs. Chen mention something about a fire on the south side, about investigators calling it arson, about bodies found in the rubble. But surely Lucien hadn't. She looked at him. He was pointing out boats on the lake to Isla, completely focused on their daughter. He looked like any normal father sharing something special with his child. He looked nothing like a man who'd killed 6 people a week ago. Another text arrived. "Ask him, unless you're too afraid of the truth." "Lucien," Evelyn heard herself say, "can I talk to you for a minute?" He glanced at her. Something in her expression made his eyes sharpen. "Isla, stay right here and count all the boats you can see. Don't move from this window." "Okay?" Isla pressed her nose back to the glass. Lucien followed Evelyn to the far side of the tower room. "What's wrong?" She showed him her phone. His face went completely blank. The kind of blank that was worse than any expression because it meant he was calculating, processing, deciding how much truth to reveal. "Who sent this?" he asked quietly. "I don't know. Unknown number." Lucien took her phone and scrolled through the messages. His jaw tightened with each word. When he looked up, his eyes were dark with something that might have been fury or might have been fear. "We need to leave. Now." "Answer the question first. The warehouse fire." "Not here. Not in front of Isla." He crossed to their daughter. "Hey, sweetheart. We need to go back downstairs for a bit." "But we just got here." "I know, but something came up that needs my attention. We'll come back tomorrow, I promise." Isla's face crumpled with disappointment, but she took Lucien's offered hand. They descended the spiral stairs in tense silence. Evelyn's mind spun with possibilities, each one worse than the last. When they reached the main floor, Lucien handed Isla off to Mrs. Chen with instructions to keep her in the kitchen with cartoons and snacks. Then he grabbed Evelyn's arm and pulled her into his study, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. "Talk," Evelyn demanded. "What happened at that warehouse?" Lucien moved to his desk and unlocked a drawer. He pulled out a tablet and brought up a news article. The headline screamed about arson and murder, about 6 bodies found burned beyond recognition, about a police investigation going nowhere because no one was talking. "Read it," he said. Evelyn scanned the article. Her stomach turned over. "Tell me you didn't do this." "I didn't do this." "Then why?" "Because someone wants you to think I did." Lucien's voice was hard. "This text isn't random, Evelyn. Someone is trying to drive a wedge between us. Make you afraid. Make you run." "Maybe I should be afraid. 6 people are dead. 6 people who worked for Alexei Volkov. 6 people who were running a human trafficking operation out of that warehouse." Lucien's eyes blazed. Someone burned it down, killed everyone inside. And yes, it looks like my work. It's meant to look like my work, but I didn't do it." Evelyn wanted to believe him, needed to believe him, but the doubt was already seeping in like poison. "How do I know that's true?" "Because I'm telling you it's true." "You've lied before." "I have never lied to you." The explosion came fast and violent. "I've kept secrets. I've controlled information. But I have never once looked you in the eye and lied. And I'm not starting now." Evelyn's phone buzzed again. More texts. "Coming rapid fire now. He's lying. He always lies. Check his calendar. He was in that neighborhood the night of the fire. How many more people have to die before you protect your daughter?" She looked at Lucien. "Were you on the south side last Tuesday night?" His silence was answer enough. "Lucien, were you there or not?" "I was meeting with someone about the Volkov situation, but I didn't touch that warehouse." "Who were you meeting?" "I can't tell you that." "Can't or won't?" "Does it matter?" Lucien's frustration was palpable. "You've already decided I'm guilty, just like 5 years ago, just like always." Another text arrived. This one included a photo. Lucien standing outside a building. The timestamp showed last Tuesday at 11 p.m. And behind him, visible in the distance, flames were starting to consume what looked like a warehouse. Evelyn's hands went numb. She showed him the photo. Lucien stared at it for a long moment. Then he grabbed her phone and threw it across the room. It hit the wall and shattered into pieces. "That's fake," he said. "Photoshopped. Manufactured evidence to make you doubt me. Or it's proof that you're exactly what I've always feared." Evelyn's voice cracked. "A killer who burns people alive and then lies to the mother of his child about it. You don't believe that." "I don't know what to believe anymore." The words came out as a scream. "You tell me we're safe here, that you're protecting us, but someone just sent me proof that you murdered 6 people last week. How is that protecting us? How is that making Isla safe?" Lucien grabbed her shoulders. "Listen to me. Whoever sent those texts wants exactly this reaction. They want you scared. They want you to take Isla and run, because the second you leave this estate, they can get to you." "Let go of me. Evelyn, I said let go." He released her like she'd burned him. Stepped back. The devastation in his face was almost enough to make her take it back. Almost. "I need to think," she said. "I need space. I need—" The study door burst open. One of Lucien's security men stood there, out of breath and bleeding from a cut above his eye. "Sir, we have a breach. South perimeter. 3 armed men made it past the first checkpoint." Lucien's entire demeanor changed in a heartbeat. The hurt vanished. The man who'd been teaching his daughter to swim disappeared. What emerged was the predator Evelyn had always known lived underneath. "Where's Isla?" he demanded. "Still in the kitchen with Mrs. Chen. Get them to the safe room. Now." Lucien moved to another drawer and pulled out a handgun. "How many men do we have on site?" 6. "But Morrison's down. They shot him at the gate." Lucien's face went hard as stone. "Lock down the estate. No one in or out. And find out how the hell they got past our security." The guard ran. Lucien checked his weapon with practiced efficiency, then looked at Evelyn. "Stay here. Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone except me." "What's happening?" "What I told you would happen. Volkov found out about Isla, and now he's coming for her." Terror slammed into Evelyn's chest. "We need to get to her." "She's safe. The kitchen safe room is reinforced steel. Nothing's getting through those walls." Lucien moved to the door. "But I need to make sure these men don't make it any further into the estate." "Lucien, wait." He was already gone. Running down the hallway with the gun held low and ready. Evelyn heard his footsteps fade. Heard shouting from somewhere deeper in the house. Heard what might have been gunfire echoing through the ancient halls. She stood frozen in the study for exactly 3 seconds. Then her maternal instinct kicked in, and she was running, not to the safe room, not to hide, but toward the kitchen where her daughter was supposed to be protected. The hallways of the estate had transformed into something from a nightmare. Emergency lights strobed red. Security alarms wailed. Evelyn ran past staff members herding into locked rooms, past security personnel taking up positions at strategic corners. She hit the kitchen at full speed. Mrs. Chen was there, pale and shaking, but no Isla. "Where is she?" Evelyn gasped. "The safe room, just like Mr. Ashford ordered." Evelyn ran to the door concealed behind the pantry shelving. It was solid steel, seamless, with a biometric lock that only opened for approved handprints. She pressed her palm against the scanner. Access denied. She tried again. Same result. Panic clawed up her throat. It's not working! Mrs. Chen pushed her aside and tried her own hand. The lock clicked green and the door swung open to reveal a small, windowless room lined with supplies and communications equipment. Empty. Completely empty. She was here, Mrs. Chen whispered. I locked her in myself. She was sitting right there with her rabbit. Evelyn's world tilted. Where is she? Where is my daughter? A voice crackled over the estate's intercom system. Male, accented, amused. Looking for the little girl? Evelyn's blood turned to ice. She's safe. For now. If you want her to stay that way, Ashford, you'll meet me in the main hall. Alone. 5 minutes. The intercom cut off. Evelyn ran. She didn't think. Didn't plan. Just ran toward the main hall with her heart trying to punch through her ribs. She burst through the double doors and stopped cold. Alexei Volkov stood in the center of Lucien's entrance hall like he owned it. Tall, broad, scarred across his left cheek in a way that looked deliberate. He wore an expensive suit and held a gun in one hand. In his other arm, he held Iela. She was crying, clutching Mr. Rabbit, looking at her mother with terror that broke Evelyn's heart into dust. Mama! Let her go, Evelyn said. Her voice came out steady even though she was dying inside. Please. She's just a little girl. She's leverage. Volkov's accent was thick, Russian, cold. The one thing Ashford values more than his empire. I'm here, Lucien's voice came from behind Evelyn. She turned to see him enter the hall, hands raised, gun discarded. Let the child go. This is between us. Volkov laughed. Everything is between us now. You've been taking territory that belongs to me for 3 years, killing my people, burning my operations. Did you think there would be no consequences? The warehouse wasn't me. No, it was me. Volkov's smile was vicious. Burned my own people. Made it look like your work. Sent the evidence to your woman here so she would see what you really are. He shifted Iela in his arms and she whimpered. Worked perfectly, I think. She was ready to run. Ready to take this precious little thing far away from the monster. Evelyn felt like she'd been punched. You set him up. I created doubt. Doubt is a weapon, Mrs. Vale, more powerful than bullets. Volkov's eyes went to Lucien. Tell me, Ashford, if I kill the child, how long before you destroy yourself? You hurt her, and there's nowhere on earth you can hide, Lucien said quietly. The threat in his voice was absolute. I will end you. Your organization, everyone you've ever cared about. I will burn your world until there's nothing left but ash. Bold words from a man with no leverage. I have plenty of leverage. You're standing in my house, surrounded by my people. You might have gotten in, Alexei, but you're not getting out, not alive. Volkov's jaw tightened. Then we all die together. He pressed the gun against Isla's head. Evelyn's world exploded into red. She didn't think, didn't calculate, just moved. She lunged at Volkov with everything she had, screaming her daughter's name. The gun went off. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. Evelyn felt something punch through her shoulder, hot, sharp. She stumbled and hit the marble floor hard enough to crack her vision into static. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard Iela screaming, heard Lucien roaring, heard chaos erupting as security personnel flooded the hall. Gunfire, shouting, the wet sound of bodies hitting floor. Evelyn rolled onto her back and pressed her hand to her shoulder. Blood welled between her fingers. The pain was distant, unimportant. All that mattered was, Iela, she gasped. Someone dropped to their knees beside her. Lucien. His face was spattered with blood that wasn't his own. His hands were on her shoulder, pressing down, trying to stop the bleeding. You're okay, he said. His voice was shaking. You're going to be okay. Iela. She's safe. She's safe. One of my men has her. She's not hurt. Evelyn's vision was starting to blur. The ceiling above her swam in and out of focus. She could hear Iela crying somewhere close, calling for her mama. I need to go to her. Evelyn tried to sit up. Lucien held her down. You need to stay still. You're losing blood. Is he dead? Yes. Good. Evelyn's eyes were getting heavy. Tell her, Tell Isla I'm okay. Don't let her see me like this. Evelyn, stay with me. But the darkness was already pulling her under. The last thing she heard was Lucien shouting for a doctor, for help, for someone to save the woman he'd lost once and couldn't afford to lose again. Then nothing. Bam. Evelyn woke up in a bed that wasn't hers. White walls, antiseptic smell, the steady beep of a heart monitor beside her. Her shoulder was on fire beneath layers of bandages, and her mouth tasted like chemicals. Hospital. She was in a hospital. Mama? Evelyn turned her head. Isla sat in a chair that was too big for her, holding Mr. Rabbit, looking small and scared and exhausted. The second their eyes met, Isla scrambled out of the chair and climbed carefully onto the bed. You're awake! You're awake! Tears streamed down her face. I thought you were gone forever. Evelyn wrapped her good arm around her daughter and held on tight. I'm here, baby. I'm okay. I'm so sorry you were scared. The bad man grabbed me, and then you got hurt, and there was so much noise. Isla's words tumbled out in a rush. Lucien said you were brave, that you saved me. Where is Lucien? He's been here the whole time. He only left to get coffee. As if summoned, the door opened. Lucien stood there holding a paper cup and looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. His clothes were wrinkled. His hair was a mess. Dark circles carved shadows under his eyes. When he saw Evelyn was awake, relief crashed across his face so powerfully it was almost painful to witness. You're awake, he said unnecessarily. Apparently. He set down the coffee and moved to the other side of the bed. His hand hovered over hers like he wanted to touch, but wasn't sure he had permission. How do you feel? Like I got shot. The bullet went clean through, missed anything vital. Doctor says you'll be fine in a few weeks. And Isla? Not a scratch. Terrified but physically unharmed. His eyes went to their daughter. She's been very brave. Isla pressed closer to Evelyn. I don't want to be brave anymore. I want to go home. The question hung in the air between all three of them. Where was home now? The estate that had been invaded? The apartment in Indianapolis that no longer existed? Somewhere new where they could pretend this had never happened? We'll figure it out, Evelyn said quietly. Lucien's jaw worked. I need to tell you something about what happened. Lucien, not now. She needs to hear this. He looked at Isla. Sweetheart, can you go sit in that chair for a minute? I need to talk to your mama about grown-up things. Isla hesitated, then climbed off the bed and returned to her chair with Mr. Rabbit. Lucien waited until she was out of earshot, then leaned close to Evelyn. Volkov didn't come alone. He had a network of people working for him. Inside my organization, inside my security team. That's how he got into the estate so easily. Lucien's voice was barely above a whisper. I've been cleaning house for the past 18 hours, finding everyone who betrayed me, dealing with them. Evelyn knew what dealing with them meant. How many? 7, including 2 men I've trusted for years. What did you do to them? Lucien's eyes were empty. What needed to be done? Evelyn should have been horrified, should have recoiled from the casual way he discussed murder, but all she felt was exhausted acceptance. This was who he was, who he'd always been, a man who protected what was his with absolute brutality, and right now she was too tired to care. The texts, she said, the photos. All of it was Volkov? All of it. He knew exactly what would drive you away, knew your history, your fears. He weaponized them. Lucien's hand finally closed over hers. I should have seen it coming, should have protected you better. You can't protect against everything. I can try. His grip tightened. When I saw you go down, when I thought that bullet had... He stopped, swallowed. I've never been that afraid in my life. Evelyn looked at this man who controlled a criminal empire, who killed without hesitation, who'd manipulated her return to Chicago and orchestrated 6 months of her life. And she saw the truth beneath all of it. He was terrified of losing them. I jumped in front of a gun for our daughter, she said quietly. You killed 7 people to protect us. Maybe we're both more broken than we want to admit. Maybe. Lucien's thumb traced circles on her palm. Or maybe we just love her enough to become monsters when we have to. Isla appeared beside the bed again, clearly tired of being excluded. Are you done talking about grown-up things? For now, Evelyn said. Good, because I want to go home. The real home. with the tower and the fish and the big pool. Isla looked between them with a seriousness that didn't belong on a 4-year-old's face. And I want both of you there, together, like a real family. Evelyn's breath caught. She looked at Lucien, saw her own shock reflected back. Isla, she started. I'm not stupid, Isla interrupted. I know Lucien is my daddy. I've known for a while. You both look at each other the way people do in movies before they kiss. And he looks at me like I'm the most important thing in the world. She crossed her small arms. So can we please just go home and stop pretending? The silence that followed was broken only by the heart monitor's steady beep. Lucien recovered first. You knew. I'm 4, not dumb. Isla climbed back onto the bed and wedged herself between them. Mr. Rabbit says we should all live together. He's very smart about these things. Evelyn couldn't help it. She laughed. It hurt her shoulder and brought tears to her eyes, but she couldn't stop. The absurdity of it all, the terror and violence and manipulation. And it was their 4-year-old daughter who cut through the complexity with perfect clarity. Lucien was laughing too, quiet, exhausted, but real. Mr. Rabbit is very wise, he managed. I told you. Isla snuggled against Evelyn's uninjured side. So when can we go home? Evelyn looked at Lucien over their daughter's head, saw the question there, the hope, the fear that she'd say no, that she'd choose to run again now that the immediate danger had passed. She thought about this past 5 years, the running, the hiding, the exhaustion of always looking over her shoulder, the loneliness of raising Isla alone, the fear that never quite went away. And she thought about the past 3 weeks, watching Lucien with Isla, seeing him gentle and patient and completely devoted, learning that maybe the monster she'd feared was more complicated than she'd ever allowed herself to believe. He'd killed for them, would kill again without hesitation, and she'd taken a bullet for their daughter. Maybe they were both exactly the kind of broken that could only survive together. We'll go home when the doctor says I can leave, Evelyn heard herself say. All 3 of us. Isla's face lit up. Really? Really? But we need to talk about some new rules. Later, Lucien interrupted. Rules can wait. For now, let's just... He trailed off, looking lost. Be a family? Evelyn offered. His smile was small but genuine. Yeah, that. Isla fell asleep between them within minutes, exhausted from the trauma of the past day. Evelyn stayed awake, her good hand stroking her daughter's hair while Lucien kept watch like he expected enemies to burst through the door any second. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now we rebuild. Make the estate actually secure instead of just thinking it was. I have some calls to make. People who need to understand what happens when they come after my family. Your family, Evelyn tested the words. Is that what we are? That's what you've always been, since the day Isla was born. Maybe even before that. Lucien's eyes met hers. I know I don't deserve a second chance. Or a third, or however many we're on now, but I'm asking for one anyway. On one condition. Name it. No more secrets, no more manipulation. If we're doing this, really doing this, then we do it honestly, even when the truth is ugly. Lucien considered this. Some truths will scare you. I jumped in front of a bullet today. I think I can handle scared. Fair point. He reached across Isla's sleeping form and took Evelyn's hand. No more secrets, I promise. Evelyn knew she was probably making a mistake, knew that loving a man like Lucien Ashford came with consequences most people couldn't survive, knew that raising a daughter in his world would require constant vigilance and compromises she couldn't yet imagine. But looking at the 3 of them, broken and bloody and somehow still holding together, she also knew something else. Some families were built on white picket fences and Sunday dinners. Theirs would be built on bullet wounds and body counts, and the kind of love that burned hot enough to destroy anyone who threatened it. And maybe that was exactly what they needed to survive. Outside the hospital window, Chicago sprawled under a sky turning from gray to gold as evening approached. Somewhere in that city, Lucien's people were cleaning up the mess, making bodies disappear, ensuring that what happened at the estate would never make it into police reports or newspaper headlines. The world would keep turning. The empire would keep running, and the Ashford family, finally, completely, irrevocably together, would learn how to navigate the treacherous space between love and violence. It wouldn't be easy. It probably wouldn't even be safe, but it would be theirs. And after 5 years of running, Evelyn Vale was finally ready to stand still and fight for it. The estate felt different when they returned 3 days later. Evelyn noticed it the moment Lucien's car pulled through the reinforced gates. New security cameras every 20 feet, armed guards patrolling the perimeter in pairs, bulletproof glass installed in every ground floor window. The beautiful prison had become an actual fortress. Isla pressed her face against the car window, oblivious to the transformation. "We're home! Mr. Rabbit, look, we're home!" Lucien helped Evelyn out of the car with careful hands, mindful of her shoulder still healing beneath the sling. His eyes swept the grounds constantly, cataloging threats that didn't exist yet, but might. He'd barely slept since the attack. She could see it in the rigid set of his shoulders, the way his hand never strayed far from the weapon concealed under his jacket. "You need to rest," she said quietly. "I'll rest when I know you're both safe. We're safe now. You made sure of that." His laugh was bitter. "Volkov had 7 people inside my organization. 7. Who knows how many more are out there waiting for another opportunity?" Mrs. Chen met them at the door with Isla's favorite juice and a carefully neutral expression that told Evelyn the head housekeeper had seen things over the past 3 days that would never be discussed. The staff moved around them with the quiet efficiency of people who'd learned not to ask questions. "Your rooms have been prepared," Mrs. Chen said. "Both of them." Evelyn caught the emphasis. "Both?" Lucien's jaw tightened. "I had the master suite expanded, added a second bedroom connected to the main one. For Isla." He wouldn't meet her eyes. "Unless you'd prefer to stay in the staff quarters." The presumption should have angered her. Instead, it just felt inevitable. They'd crossed too many lines to go back to pretending they were strangers living in the same house. "The master suite is fine," Evelyn said. Isla was already running toward the stairs, Mr. Rabbit bouncing in her grip. "Can I see my new room? Does it have windows? Can I see the fish pond from there?" "Go look," Lucien called after her. "But don't touch anything until your mother and I get there." They followed more slowly, Evelyn's shoulder protesting each step. The second floor had been transformed. What used to be Lucien's private domain now felt like space carved out for 3 people instead of 1. Isla's new bedroom was painted soft lavender with furniture sized for a child and toys Evelyn had never seen before. "When did you do all this?" she asked. "While you were in the hospital. I needed to keep busy." Lucien stood in the doorway, watching Isla explore with the kind of hunger that came from missed years. Needed to do something that wasn't hunting down traitors. "How many did you find?" "All of them." His voice was flat, dead. "They won't be a problem anymore." Evelyn knew better than to ask for details. Some truths were better left in the dark. Isla discovered the window seat overlooking the gardens and squealed with delight. "Mama, look, I can see everything." Evelyn sank onto the small bed, exhaustion pulling at her bones. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the attack and hospital stay was finally draining away, leaving only pain and the bone-deep fatigue that came after surviving something that should have killed you. Lucien appeared beside her with a glass of water and pain medication. "Doctor said every 6 hours. I'm fine." "You got shot protecting our daughter. You're not fine." He pressed the pills into her hand. "Take them." She was too tired to argue. The medication went down bitter and chemical. Lucien's hand lingered on her good shoulder for a moment before he pulled away like he'd touched fire. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "About what happens next." "Can it wait until I'm not falling asleep sitting up?" "No, because in about 2 hours I have a meeting with the remaining heads of my organization. They need to see that I'm still in control, that Volkov's attack didn't weaken me." His eyes were hard. "And they need to understand that my family is off limits, completely, forever." Evelyn's stomach knotted. "What are you going to do?" "Whatever it takes." He glanced at Isla, still chattering to Mr. Rabbit about her new room. "I'm restructuring everything, cutting out anyone I can't trust completely. The Empire's going to be smaller for a while, but it'll be secure." "And the people you're cutting out? What happens to them?" Lucien's silence was answer enough. "You're going to kill them all," Evelyn said flatly. "I'm going to eliminate threats. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yes." Because I'm not doing this for power or money or territory. I'm doing it so Isla can sleep without armed guards in her bedroom. So you can walk through the gardens without wondering if there's a sniper in the trees. His voice dropped. I'm doing it so we can have something that looks like a normal life, even if the cost is abnormal. Evelyn understood the logic even as it made her sick. This was the world they lived in now, where love required body counts and safety came at the price of other people's lives. How long will this take? She asked. The meeting? 2 hours? Maybe 3? No, the restructuring, the eliminating, all of it. Lucien looked away. As long as it needs to. Before Evelyn could respond, her phone buzzed. She'd gotten a new one after Lucien destroyed the old one. The number on the screen was unknown, but local. She answered before thinking. Hello? Heavy breathing, then a voice that made her blood freeze. Mrs. Vale, or should I say Mrs. Ashford? Not Volkov. He was dead. But the accent was similar, Russian, male, amused in a way that promised violence. Who is this? A friend of Alexei's. He told me about the little girl before he died, about the woman worth more than territory. The voice turned cold. You cost us a lot of money, a lot of blood. That debt needs to be paid. Lucien saw her expression and crossed the room in 2 strides. He grabbed the phone from her hand and put it on speaker. Who are you? He demanded. The person who's going to burn your world down, Ashford. You thought Volkov was the only one who wanted you gone? He was just the first. The line went dead. Lucien stared at the phone for a long moment. Then he made a call. Marcus, conference room, 5 minutes. We have a problem. He ended the call and looked at Evelyn. All the carefully maintained control was gone from his face. What remained was something feral and terrifying. Pack a bag, he said, for you and Isla. Enough for a week. We just got home, and now you're leaving. There's a safe house in Michigan, on the lake, remote, secure. My people will take you there while I handle this. No. Evelyn stood despite the pain screaming through her shoulder. We're not running again. This isn't running. This is strategy. You get somewhere safe while I eliminate the threat. I said no. She moved between Lucien and the door. I spent 5 years running from you, from this world, from everything that scared me. And it didn't make us safer. It just made us easier targets. She grabbed his arm with her good hand. We stay together. We face this together, or we don't face it at all. You don't understand what you're asking. I understand perfectly. You're about to go to war, about to burn down anyone who threatens us, and you want me and Isla tucked away somewhere so you can pretend we're not the reason for all of it. Evelyn's voice turned hard. But we are the reason. So we stay. And you teach me how to survive in your world instead of pretending I can exist outside it. Lucien stared at her like she'd grown a second head. You want to be part of this. I want to stop being a weakness you have to protect. I want to be a partner who can stand beside you when everything goes to hell. She released his arm. Or I can take Isla and disappear so completely you'll never find us. Your choice. The threat landed exactly as intended. Lucien's face went pale. You wouldn't. Try me. Send us away to that safe house and see if we're still there when you come back. They stared at each other while Isla continued playing in the background, completely unaware that her parents were negotiating the terms of their survival. You're serious, Lucien said finally. Completely. You understand what that means? What I'll have to teach you? What you'll have to see? I took a bullet 3 days ago. I think I can handle it. Something shifted in Lucien's expression. The fear bled away, replaced by something that might have been respect, or recognition, or the grim acceptance that came with realizing your partner was just as damaged as you were. Okay, he said quietly. You stay. But we do this my way. You follow my rules. And if I say run, you run. No arguments, no hesitation. Agreed. And Isla stays with Mrs. Chen in the secure wing. Armed guards, no exceptions. Agreed. Lucien pulled her against him carefully, mindful of her injury. His mouth found hers in a kiss that tasted like desperation, and promises neither of them knew if they could keep. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with something that went beyond desire. If I lose you again, you won't. Evelyn's hand fisted in his shirt. We're done losing each other. The meeting started exactly on time. Evelyn sat beside Lucien at the head of the conference table in the estate's underground level, a room she'd never known existed until today. Reinforced concrete walls, no windows, security monitors showing every angle of the property. 8 men sat around the table. All of them looked at Evelyn like she was a bomb that might detonate. She met each gaze without flinching. Let them see that she wasn't going anywhere. Lucien didn't waste time on pleasantries. "We have a problem. Volkov had allies who are looking for revenge. They just made contact." He played the recording of the phone call. "Anyone recognize that voice?" One of the older men, Marcus, based on how Lucien had addressed him, nodded slowly. "Sounds like Dmitry Kozlov. He ran operations with Volkov in Detroit. If he's making threats, he's probably already mobilizing." "How many people can he field?" "Maybe 20, maybe more if he's bringing in outside contractors." Marcus looked uncomfortable. "He's not as smart as Volkov, but he's meaner. And he holds grudges." "Good." Lucien's smile was vicious. "That makes him predictable. What's his preferred approach?" "Direct assault, overwhelming force. He doesn't do subtle." "Then we make him think we're vulnerable. Pull back security on the east perimeter. Make it look like we're focused on the main gates." Lucien looked around the table. "But we reinforce the underground. Every exit, every tunnel. Anyone comes through those walls, they walk into a kill box." One of the younger men spoke up. "You're using the estate as bait?" "I'm using myself as bait. My family stays in the secure wing. The rest of us spread out and wait." Lucien's voice was cold. "When Kozlov comes, we end this completely. No survivors. No one left to carry grudges or plan revenge." "That's a lot of bodies," Marcus said carefully. "Then make sure they're the right bodies." Lucien stood. "You have 12 hours to prepare. Questions?" Silence. "Good. Get to work." The men filed out. Evelyn stayed seated, processing what she'd just witnessed. This was the other side of Lucien, the strategist, the killer, the man who planned massacres with the same calm efficiency most people use to organize dinner parties. "Having second thoughts?" Lucien asked when they were alone. "Constantly, but I'm still here. You don't have to be in the estate when it happens. I can still send you an Isla." "No." Evelyn stood and faced him. "But I want something from you first." "What?" She moved to the weapons cabinet against the wall and pulled it open. Handguns, rifles, things she didn't have names for. "Teach me how to use these. All of them." Lucien's expression went carefully blank. "Why?" "Because if someone gets past your kill box and makes it to the secure wing, I want to be able to protect our daughter. Not just hide behind a door and pray your people get there in time." "Evelyn, you said no more secrets, no more treating me like I'm too fragile to handle reality." She pulled out a handgun that looked less terrifying than the others. "So teach me. Show me how to survive in your world instead of just existing in it." Lucien took the gun from her hands and checked it with practiced efficiency. "This isn't something you learn in 12 hours. "Then teach me enough to not accidentally shoot myself. The rest can come later." He studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Okay, but we do this properly. Safety first, fundamentals. No heroics." "Agreed." They spent the next 4 hours in the estate's private shooting range, another space Evelyn hadn't known existed. Lucien was a patient teacher, breaking down each component until the weapon became less foreign in her hands. How to hold it, how to aim, how to control the recoil, how to overcome the instinct to close your eyes when pulling the trigger. Her shoulder screamed with each shot. The noise was deafening even through ear protection, and every instinct told her this was wrong, that holding an instrument of death went against everything she'd been raised to believe. But she kept shooting, kept learning. Because Isla was upstairs with Mrs. Chen and armed guards, and the only thing standing between her daughter and people who wanted to use her as leverage was Evelyn's willingness to become something she'd never wanted to be. "You're pulling left," Lucien said from behind her. His hands came up to adjust her grip. "Keep your wrists locked. Let the gun do the work." She fired again. The target's center mass took the hit closer to where she'd aimed. Better. His breath was warm against her ear. Again. By the time they finished, Evelyn's hands were shaking from exhaustion and her shoulder was bleeding through the bandage. But she could hit a stationary target 7 times out of 10. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than nothing. Lucien took the gun from her hands and set it aside. You did good. I feel sick. That's normal. First time I fired a weapon at the range, I threw up afterward. He helped her out of the ear protection. It gets easier. That's what scares me. They stood in the soundproofed room, surrounded by the smell of gunpowder and the evidence of Evelyn's crash course in violence. Lucien's hand stayed on her arm, steadying her. You can still back out, he said quietly. Take Isla to the safe house. Let me handle this. You don't have to become what I am. Maybe I don't have to. But maybe I want to. Evelyn looked up at him. You've been carrying this alone for so long, protecting everyone while pretending you don't need protecting yourself. That ends now. I don't need... Yes, you do. You're terrified. I can see it every time you look at Isla, every time you think about what almost happened. Her hand came up to touch his face. You're not invincible, Lucien. And you're not alone anymore. His control finally cracked. He pulled her against him and kissed her like he was drowning, and she was air, desperate, consuming, full of all the fear and need and violence he kept locked behind careful walls. Evelyn kissed him back just as hard, let herself fall into the darkness that had always scared her. Because maybe that's what love looked like in a world where safety was an illusion, and the only real security came from being willing to destroy anyone who threatened what you cared about. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lucien rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said. I never stopped. Even when I hated you for leaving, even when I wanted to punish you for taking Isla, under all of it, I loved you. I know. Evelyn's voice cracked. I loved you too. That's why I ran. Because loving you meant accepting parts of yourself I wasn't ready to face. And now I'm ready for all of it. The good, the terrible, whatever comes next. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. But after we survive tonight, we're going to figure out how to build something that isn't just about survival. Something Isla can grow up in without thinking violence is the only answer. I don't know how to do that. Neither do I, but we'll learn together. Lucien kissed her again, softer this time. Like a promise. Like a prayer to something neither of them believed in but hoped existed anyway. The moment shattered when Marcus's voice crackled over the intercom. Boss, we have movement on the east perimeter. Multiple vehicles. Looks like Kozlov's making his play early. Lucien's entire demeanor transformed. The man who'd been kissing her disappeared. What emerged was the predator who'd built an empire on calculated violence. How many? He demanded. At least 15. Maybe more. They're spreading out, trying to surround the estate. Let them think they're succeeding, everyone to positions, and Marcus, yeah? This ends tonight, completely. Understood. Lucien grabbed Evelyn's hand and pulled her toward the door. They ran through underground corridors she was still learning existed, past security checkpoints and armories, until they reached the secure wing where Isla waited. Mrs. Chen met them at the reinforced door, her usual calm expression replaced with barely concealed fear. She's asking for you both. They found Isla sitting on a bed in the windowless safe room, clutching Mr. Rabbit and trying very hard not to cry. The second she saw them, her composure crumbled. I heard Marcus on the radio. Bad men are coming again, aren't they? Lucien knelt in front of his daughter and took her small hands in his. Yes, but they're not going to get anywhere near you, I promise. You promised before and Mama got hurt. The accusation hit harder than any bullet. Lucien's face went pale. I know, sweetheart, I know, but this time is different. This time we're ready. What if you get hurt? What if Mama gets hurt again? What if... Her voice broke into sobs. Evelyn sat beside her and pulled Isla into a careful hug. Listen to me, baby. Your father and I are going to do everything we can to keep you safe, and then we're all going to be together again, okay? You're leaving? Isla's eyes went wide with terror. Just for a little while. Mrs. Chen is going to stay with you, and there are guards right outside the door. Nobody's getting through. I want you to stay, both of you. We can't, Lucien said gently. We need to make sure those bad men can't hurt anyone. But we'll come back, I swear it. Isla looked between them with 4-year-old wisdom that understood more than she should. You're going to fight them. Yes. Are you going to kill them? The question hung in the air like smoke. Evelyn opened her mouth to deflect, to soften it, to protect their daughter from truth she was too young to handle. But Lucien answered first. Yes, because they want to hurt our family, and I won't let that happen. Good. Isla's voice was small but fierce. Mr. Rabbit says family protects family. Mr. Rabbit is very smart. Lucien kissed his daughter's forehead. I love you more than anything in this world. I love you too, Daddy. It was the first time she'd called him that. Lucien's eyes went shiny with tears he refused to shed. He stood quickly and looked at Evelyn. We need to go. Evelyn kissed Isla one more time. Be brave, baby. We'll see you soon. Mama? When this is over, can we get a dog? Despite everything, Evelyn laughed. Yes, when this is over, we'll get you a dog. They left Isla with Mrs. Chen and 4 armed guards. The door sealed behind them with a hiss of hydraulics. Evelyn tried not to think about how that might be the last time she saw her daughter. Lucien led her to a monitoring station where they could see every camera feed from the estate. Men in dark clothing were spreading across the grounds like cancer, at least 20, maybe more in vehicles that hadn't appeared on screen yet. They're going to breach the east wall in about 2 minutes, Lucien said calmly. He handed Evelyn the handgun she'd practiced with. You remember everything I taught you? Yes? You stay here. Watch the monitors. If anyone gets past our defensive positions and heads toward the secure wing, you radio Marcus and shoot anything that comes through that door that isn't one of us. Where will you be? Where I need to be. He checked his own weapon with mechanical precision. Leading them into the trap. Evelyn grabbed his arm before he could leave. Don't die. Wasn't planning on it. He kissed her hard. Stay alive. Our daughter needs her mother. She needs her father too. Then I guess we both better survive. He was gone before she could respond, moving through the corridors with the confidence of someone who'd spent his entire life preparing for war. Evelyn stood alone in the monitoring station, surrounded by screens showing men with guns getting closer to her home, to her daughter, to everything she'd fought so hard to protect. Her hands were shaking, her shoulder was bleeding again, and every instinct screamed at her to run, to grab Isla and disappear into the night like she'd done 5 years ago. But she didn't run. She checked the weapon Lucien had given her, verified the safety was off, and she watched the screens as Kozlov's men breached the east wall exactly when Lucien said they would. They poured through the opening like water. 15, 20, 25. More than Marcus had estimated. They spread across the grounds with military precision, moving toward the main house in coordinated groups, and they walked straight into Lucien's trap. The first explosion lit up the east gardens like daylight. The second followed 3 seconds later. Men screamed. Bodies flew. The carefully coordinated assault turned into chaos as Kozlov's forces realized they'd walked into a kill zone. Gunfire erupted from every direction. Lucien's people had been positioned in the gardens, in the outbuildings, behind reinforced positions that turned the estate grounds into a maze of death. Evelyn watched men fall on the monitors, watched Kozlov's assault force get cut down with brutal efficiency. But they kept coming. More vehicles appeared on the outer cameras. Reinforcements Kozlov had held back. They crashed through the damaged east wall and disgorged more armed men, 30, 40, 50. This wasn't an assault, it was an invasion. Evelyn keyed the radio with shaking hands. Marcus? There are more coming. A lot more. We see them. Fall back to secondary positions. Hold the line at the main house. On the monitors, she watched Lucien's men retreat in organized chaos. Watched the defenders get pushed back step by step as Kozlov's overwhelming numbers pressed forward. And then she saw him. Lucien, moving through the gardens with a weapon in each hand, firing with the kind of precision that came from years of practice. Men fell around him. He didn't stop, didn't slow, just kept advancing toward the largest concentration of enemy forces like he was invincible. What are you doing? Evelyn whispered to the screen. As if he could hear her, Lucien's voice crackled over the radio. All units, press forward. Push them back toward the east wall. Don't let them regroup. Boss, there's too many, Marcus started. Do it! The order was absolute. Evelyn watched as Lucien's people stopped retreating and started advancing. The battle lines shifted. What had been a defensive hold became an aggressive push. And that's when everything went wrong. A grenade landed 10 feet from where Lucien was taking cover. Evelyn saw it on the monitor, saw him see it, saw him make the calculation in the half-second before it detonated. He ran. The explosion threw him forward into the koi pond. He didn't get up. Evelyn's world stopped. "Lucien!" she screamed into the radio. "Someone get to him! He's down! He's down!" No response, just gunfire and shouting and the sound of men dying. On the monitors, enemy forces were converging on the pond, on Lucien's unmoving body. Evelyn made a decision that 5 years ago would have been impossible. She ran. Through the corridors, up the stairs, out the reinforced doors into the garden where hell had come to visit. The sound of gunfire was deafening. Bullets tore through the air around her, but she didn't stop, didn't think. Just ran toward the pond where the man she loved was either dead or dying. 2 of Kozlov's men saw her coming, raised their weapons. Evelyn fired first. The gun kicked in her hands. Her aim was terrible, but at close range, terrible was enough. Both men went down. She reached the pond. Lucien was face down in the shallow water, blood spreading around him in dark clouds. Evelyn grabbed his jacket and pulled with strength that came from pure desperation. He was heavy. Too heavy. Her shoulder screamed, the wound tore open completely, but she dragged him out of the water and onto the stone pathway. "Lucien! Lucien!" She rolled him over. His face was pale, eyes closed, blood running from a gash on his temple, but his chest was moving, barely, but moving. 3 more of Kozlov's men appeared around the pond's edge. Evelyn raised the gun with hands slick with blood and water. "Stay back!" Her voice didn't sound like her own. It sounded feral, broken, deadly. The men laughed, raised their weapons, and then Marcus appeared behind them like death itself. His rifle barked 3 times. All 3 men dropped. "Get him inside!" Marcus shouted. He grabbed Lucien's other arm and together they dragged him toward the house. 2 more of Lucien's men appeared to provide covering fire. They made it to the main entrance, through the doors, into the marble foyer where Evelyn had polished floors just months ago. Lucien's eyes opened, focused on her with difficulty. "You were supposed to stay in the monitoring station," he mumbled. "You were supposed to not get blown up." "Fair point." He tried to sit up and failed. "How bad?" "Concussion, maybe broken ribs. You'll live." Marcus was already on the radio calling for their medical team. Outside, the battle was still raging, but the tide had turned. Kozlov's forces were being pushed back toward the ruined east wall. The overwhelming numbers didn't matter when they were trapped in a kill zone with nowhere to retreat. Evelyn held Lucien's hand and tried to remember how to breathe. She'd shot 2 people, killed them. Their faces would be in her nightmares forever. But Lucien was alive, and Isla was safe in the secure wing. Everything else could be dealt with later. The gunfire outside was starting to slow. Evelyn could hear Marcus coordinating the final push over the radio. The cleanup. The hunt for anyone who'd escaped into the surrounding neighborhood. Lucien's medical team arrived and started working on him despite his protests. Evelyn stepped back to give them room. That's when she heard the voice behind her. "Mrs. Ashford, we finally meet in person." She turned. Dmitry Kozlov stood in the doorway to Lucien's study, holding a gun to Mrs. Chen's head, and in his other arm he held Isla. Time stopped. Evelyn's world narrowed to a single point. Isla's terrified face, tear-streaked and pale, pressed against Dmitry Kozlov's chest, while the barrel of his gun rested against Mrs. Chen's temple. The head housekeeper's eyes were wide but steady, her hands raised in surrender. "Mama," Isla whimpered. Mr. Rabbit dangled from her small fingers, forgotten. Every muscle in Evelyn's body screamed to move, to attack, to tear her daughter away from the man holding her. But the gun in her hand suddenly felt impossibly heavy, useless. One wrong move and Mrs. Chen died. Or Isla, or both. Behind her, she heard Lucien struggle to his feet despite the medical team's protests, heard the wet rasp of his breathing, heard the click of a weapon being raised. "Don't," Kozlov said calmly. His English was good but heavily accented. "Drop the weapon, Ashford, or I paint your foyer with this woman's brain." "Let them go." Lucien's voice was steady, despite the blood running down his face. "This is between us." "Is it?" Kozlov's smile was vicious. "I think this is about much more. About you thinking you can have everything. Empire, family, power, love. He pressed the gun harder against Mrs. Chen's head, and she whimpered, "But you can't have it all. Nobody can. That's the lesson you never learned." Evelyn's mind raced. Kozlov had gotten through the secure wing, past the guards. That meant someone had helped him, another traitor, another person Lucien had trusted who'd sold them out for money or fear or revenge. "How did you get in?" Evelyn asked, trying to buy time, trying to think of something, anything that would get Isla away from that monster. Kozlov's eyes flicked to her. "Your head of security, Marcus. He's been very helpful. For the right price." "You're lying," Lucien said flatly. "Am I? How else would I know about the underground tunnels? The security codes? The exact location of your precious safe room?" Kozlov's laugh was ugly. "Everyone has a price, Ashford. Even the people you trust most." Evelyn saw the flicker of doubt cross Lucien's face, the terrible possibility that he'd been betrayed again, that his carefully constructed defenses had been shattered from the inside. "Let my daughter go," Evelyn said. Her voice was steady even though her hands were shaking. "Please, she's 4 years old. She has nothing to do with this." "She has everything to do with this. She's the only thing Ashford actually cares about." Kozlov shifted his grip on Isla, and she cried out, "Here's how this works. I walk out of here with the girl. You don't follow. You don't call your people. You don't do anything except watch me leave. And maybe, I let her live long enough for you to negotiate." "No deal," Lucien said. "Then she dies right now. You kill her and you have no leverage, no protection. My men are outside. They've already pushed your forces back. You're surrounded." Lucien took a step forward despite his injuries. "You're not leaving this house alive unless I allow it." Kozlov's jaw tightened. "Then we all die together." The gun moved from Mrs. Chen's head to Isla's. Evelyn's world turned red. She didn't think, didn't calculate, didn't consider consequences. She just moved. Her body remembered what Lucien had taught her in the shooting range. Stance, grip, breathe, aim for center mass because headshots were for movies and desperation. She fired. The bullet caught Kozlov in the shoulder, not fatal, not even close to where she'd aimed, but enough to make him stumble, enough to make his grip on Isla loosen. Mrs. Chen moved with the kind of speed that came from years of survival in dangerous households. She twisted away from Kozlov's gun, dropped to the floor, and grabbed Isla from his arms in one fluid motion. Kozlov roared with pain and fury. His weapon came up, tracking toward Mrs. Chen and Isla as they scrambled for cover. Lucien fired twice. Both shots hit center mass. Kozlov's body jerked backward. The gun fell from his fingers. He hit the floor hard, blood spreading beneath him in a rapidly expanding pool. For a moment, nobody moved. The sound of gunfire still echoed through the foyer. Smoke hung in the air. And Dmitry Kozlov stared at the ceiling with eyes that were already glazing over. Then Isla was running toward Evelyn, sobbing, and everything else ceased to matter. Evelyn dropped to her knees and caught her daughter, pulling her close with her good arm while the other hung useless at her side. Isla was shaking, crying, alive. "I've got you, baby. I've got you. You're safe. You're safe." Lucien moved past them to Kozlov's body. He checked for a pulse with clinical efficiency, then keyed his radio. "Marcus, status, static." Then Marcus's voice came through, breathless and strained. "East perimeter is secure. We're mopping up the last of them. Most surrendered when they realized Kozlov wasn't coming back. Get to the foyer, now." "On my way." Lucien looked at Evelyn over Isla's head. His face was unreadable. "Take her to the secure wing. Stay there until I give the all clear." Lucien, "Do it, please." Evelyn understood. He needed to know they were safe before he could deal with whatever came next. She gathered Isla and Mrs. Chen and headed back toward the underground corridors. Behind her, she heard Marcus arrive, heard the sharp intake of breath when he saw Kozlov's body. "Boss, I swear I didn't—" "Save it. Were you compromised or complicit?" "Compromised. He had my daughter. Said he'd kill her if I didn't give him the codes." Marcus's voice broke. "I'm sorry. I should have told you, should have trusted you to protect her, but I couldn't risk—" "Where is she now?" "Safe house in Wisconsin. I had people move her there 2 days ago when Kozlov first made contact." Evelyn heard Lucien's long exhale. Then, "You should have told me." "I know, but I understand family makes us do terrible things." A pause. "You're done. Retire. Take your daughter somewhere far away and never come back to this life. Boss, that wasn't a request. You're lucky I'm letting you walk away breathing. Don't make me regret it. Evelyn didn't hear Marcus's response. She was already descending into the secure wing with Isla and Mrs. Chen, putting as much distance as possible between them and the violence still echoing through her home. The safe room felt smaller than before. Evelyn sat on the narrow bed with Isla in her lap, rocking her daughter the way she had when Isla was an infant. Mrs. Chen moved around them quietly, checking the monitors, ensuring the door was sealed. "How did he get to you?" Evelyn asked. Mrs. Chen's face was carefully neutral. "He came through the service entrance during the chaos, had Marcus's codes. By the time I realized he wasn't one of ours, he already had the gun on me." She looked at Isla. "I'm sorry. I should have fought harder. You saved her life. When I gave you the opening, you got her away from him. That's all that matters." Isla had stopped crying, but her small body still trembled. She clutched Mr. Rabbit with white-knuckled intensity and wouldn't let go of Evelyn's shirt. "Is Daddy okay?" she asked in a small voice. "He's okay, baby. He's making sure all the bad men are gone. I don't like bad men." "I know, me neither. Can we leave? Go somewhere they can't find us?" Evelyn's heart broke. Her daughter shouldn't have to ask these questions. Shouldn't have to know that the world was full of people who would use a 4-year-old as a weapon. Shouldn't have to be this afraid. "We're not leaving," Evelyn said quietly. "This is our home, and we're going to make it safe. Whatever it takes." Isla pulled back enough to look at her mother with those storm blue eyes that were so much like Lucien's. "You killed someone. I saw you." The words hit like a physical blow. Evelyn had hoped Isla hadn't seen, hadn't processed what happened in those chaotic seconds. But of course she had. Children saw everything. "Yes," Evelyn said, "because lying would be worse." "I did, to protect you." "Does that make you bad?" "I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe. Or maybe it just makes me your mother." Evelyn stroked Isla's hair. "Sometimes good people have to do bad things to protect the people they love. That doesn't make the things less bad, but it doesn't make the people monsters either." Isla considered this with the gravity only children could bring to moral questions. "Mr. Rabbit says you're still good, even if you had to do bad things." "Mr. Rabbit is very wise. He says Daddy is good too, even though he does scary things sometimes." Evelyn's throat tightened. "Yes, your father is good. He's just complicated." "What's complicated mean?" "It means he's lots of different things at the same time. Strong and gentle, scary and kind, dangerous and loving." Evelyn met her daughter's eyes. "It means he's human, like all of us." Isla seemed satisfied with this answer. She nestled back against Evelyn's chest and yawned. The adrenaline was finally wearing off, leaving only exhaustion. "Can I sleep now?" "Yes, baby. I'll be right here." Within minutes, Isla was unconscious, her breathing evening out into the deep rhythm of childhood sleep. Evelyn held her and watched the monitors showing the estate grounds. Bodies being moved, damage being assessed, Lucien's people securing the perimeter. The battle was over. But the war, the one inside her own head, was just beginning. Dawn came gray and cold. Evelyn woke to find herself still in the safe room, Isla asleep beside her, Mrs. Chen dozing in the chair by the door. Her shoulder had bled through the bandages again, and every muscle in her body screamed with exhaustion. The door opened. Lucien stood there, still covered in blood and dirt and the evidence of the night's violence. But he was standing, breathing, alive. "It's over," he said quietly. "All of Kozlov's people are either dead or in custody. The estate is secure." Evelyn carefully extracted herself from Isla's grip and crossed to him. Up close, she could see new injuries, cuts, bruises, the kind of damage that came from being too close to an explosion. But his eyes were clear. "How many?" she asked. 43 of theirs, 7 of mine." His jaw tightened. "Good people. People who trusted me to keep them safe." "It's not your fault, isn't it? This life, this world, I built it, and now good people are dead because of choices I made years ago." He looked past her to where Isla slept. "I keep trying to protect her from it, but maybe the only way to really protect her is to burn it all down, walk away completely." Evelyn took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. You can't walk away, we both know that. Your empire doesn't just disappear because you want it to. Someone else takes over, someone worse. And then Isla's in even more danger because we don't control the variables anymore. Then what do? We change it, reshape it, use the power you have to make it into something that doesn't require body counts to maintain. She leaned her forehead against his. You told me once you imagined a different life, one where you could be normal. Maybe that's not possible, but maybe we can build something better than what you have now. Lucien's arms came around her carefully, mindful of her injury. I don't know how to be anything other than what I am. Then I'll teach you. The same way you taught me to shoot, to survive in your world. We learn together. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other while the sun rose over Chicago and illuminated the damage the night had wrought. Eventually, Isla stirred and woke, calling for them both. Lucien went to his daughter and scooped her up, pressing his face into her hair like she was the only thing keeping him anchored to humanity. Isla wrapped her arms around his neck and held on tight. Daddy, are all the bad men gone? Yes, sweetheart, they're all gone. Forever? Lucien met Evelyn's eyes over Isla's head. I'm going to make sure of it. Mosek. The next 6 months passed in a blur of reconstruction and transformation. Lucien kept his promise. He restructured the entire organization, cutting out the violent criminal enterprises and focusing on the legitimate businesses that had always been the public face of his empire. Real estate, shipping, finance, things that generated wealth without requiring bloodshed. It wasn't easy. Some of his oldest associates pushed back, tried to maintain the old ways. Those people found themselves suddenly retired with generous severance packages and the unspoken understanding that if they caused problems, the retirement would become permanent. The estate was rebuilt. Better security, stronger defenses, but also softer touches. A real playground for Isla in the gardens. The tower room converted into a library where they read stories on Sunday afternoons. The koi pond restocked with new fish that Isla named with the same creative enthusiasm she'd shown the first time. Evelyn returned to university. Online classes at first, then eventually in person when the nightmares about that night in the foyer became manageable instead of debilitating. She was working toward the art history degree she'd abandoned 5 years ago, this time with the support and resources to actually finish. Isla started preschool, made friends, learned to swim without water wings, got the dog she'd asked for, a golden retriever puppy she named Brave, after the koi fish who'd swum in front. And slowly, carefully, painfully, they learned how to be a family. Not the family Evelyn had imagined when she was 23 and naive about the world. Not the perfect nuclear unit from television shows and greeting cards, but something real, built on shared trauma and fierce protection, and the kind of love that survived bullets and betrayal. Lucien proposed on a Tuesday afternoon in the garden while Isla was at school. Nothing elaborate. No grand gesture. Just him, on one knee beside the koi pond, holding a ring that had belonged to his grandmother. I know this isn't normal, he said. I know I'm not what anyone would choose for their daughter, but you chose me anyway, chose to stay, chose to build this with me. His voice was rough with emotion. I want to make it official. I want the world to know you're mine and I'm yours, and Isla has 2 parents who are committed to each other and to her. Will you marry me? Evelyn looked at this man who'd orchestrated her return to Chicago, who'd hidden their daughter's existence from the world, who'd killed to protect them and would kill again without hesitation. This man who read bedtime stories with the same intensity he brought to business negotiations, who taught their daughter to swim and how to name fish, and that family was worth fighting for. Yes, she said, but on one condition. What? When Isla's old enough to ask about what you do, what you really do, we tell her the truth, not the sanitized version, not lies to protect her innocence, the real truth. And we let her decide if she wants to be part of this world or walk away completely. Lucien considered this. She might hate us. She might, but she'll hate us more if she finds out we lied. Agreed. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Anything else? Yeah, I want a real wedding, not some private ceremony. I want Mrs. Chen there, and the security team, and Isla in a flower girl dress making a scene. Evelyn smiled. I want proof that even people like us can have normal things sometimes. Done. They married 3 months later in the estate's gardens on a perfect autumn afternoon. Isla did indeed make a scene, mostly by insisting Brave the dog needed to be in the ceremony too. The golden retriever walked down the aisle with a ring pillow tied to his collar, tail wagging, completely oblivious to the significance of the moment. Mrs. Chen cried. The security team, most of them new hires after the purge, stood at attention like they were guarding heads of state instead of witnessing a wedding. And Lucien looked at Evelyn like she was the only thing in the world that mattered when she walked toward him in a simple white dress with Isla holding her hand. The vows were traditional. The kiss was anything but. And when they turned to face their small gathering of people who'd survived hell alongside them, Evelyn felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not the naive hope of youth that believed love could conquer anything, but the hard-won hope of someone who'd seen the worst of humanity and chosen to build something beautiful anyway. 5 years later, Evelyn stood at the window of the tower room and watched her daughter playing in the gardens below. Isla was 9 now, tall for her age, her dark curls pulled back in a ponytail that matched Evelyn's. She was teaching Brave to catch a frisbee while her younger brother, 3-year-old Thomas, who had Lucien's eyes and Evelyn's stubborn temperament, tried to keep up. They're getting too fast for the security team to track, Lucien said from behind her. He wrapped his arms around her waist and rested his chin on her shoulder. James radioed to complain that Isla keeps disappearing into the hedge maze. She gets that from you, the disappearing act. She gets everything from me, including the attitude. But his voice was warm with affection. Thomas threw a tantrum this morning when I wouldn't let him come to the office. Said he wanted to do business like Daddy. Evelyn laughed. He's 3. What does he think business is? Signing papers very seriously while drinking coffee, apparently. Lucien pressed a kiss to her neck. We're raising tiny criminals. We're raising tiny people who know their own minds. There's a difference. Is there? Yes, because we also taught them that power comes with responsibility, that protecting people is more important than controlling them, that love is worth fighting for even when it's hard. Lucien turned her in his arms to face him. At 40, he'd gained a few gray hairs and smile lines that hadn't existed 5 years ago. The darkness that used to live permanently in his eyes had softened, replaced by something that looked almost like peace. Do you regret it? He asked quietly. Staying, marrying me, bringing children into this complicated mess we call a life. Evelyn thought about the question seriously, about the nightmares that still came sometimes, about the scar on her shoulder that ached when it rained, about the knowledge that violence was always lurking at the edges of their existence, held back only by Lucien's carefully maintained control. No, she said, I don't regret it, because the alternative was spending my life running and wondering what could have been. She touched his face. We're not perfect. This family is built on secrets and scars and compromises most people wouldn't understand. But it's ours, and it's real, and that's enough. Even knowing what I was, what I'm still capable of being, especially knowing that, because you chose to be something different, for us, for them. She gestured toward the window where their children played. You could have stayed the monster, could have let the violence define you, but you didn't. You chose to build instead of destroy, to protect instead of control. That's what matters. Lucien kissed her softly. I love you, still, always, even when you make me be a better person than I want to be. Someone has to keep you honest. They stood together watching their children play until the sun started to set and the security team's shift change began. Isla came running inside with Brave at her heels, demanding dinner and stories and attention. Thomas toddled after her, chattering about frisbees and dogs and the injustice of being too small to do everything his sister could do. Evelyn and Lucien herded their chaos toward the dining room where Mrs. Chen had prepared the kind of normal family dinner that would have been impossible to imagine 10 years ago. And as they sat around the table, Lucien helping Thomas cut his food, Isla telling elaborate stories about her day, Brave begging for scraps under the table, Evelyn realized something profound. This was what winning looked like. Not perfect, not safe, not the fairy tale ending she'd once imagined, but real, honest, built on the ruins of everything they'd survived and somehow stronger because of it. She'd spent 5 years running from Lucien Ashford because she believed he was a monster. She'd spent the last 5 years learning that monsters were just people who'd been hurt badly enough to grow teeth and claws. That darkness wasn't the absence of light, but the presence of challenges that required strength to overcome. And she'd learned that love, real love, the kind that survived bullets and betrayal and the weight of terrible choices, wasn't about finding someone perfect. It was about finding someone broken in ways that matched your own damage. Someone willing to do the hard work of healing together. Someone who looked at your scars and saw proof of survival instead of weakness. After dinner, they tucked the children into bed. Isla in her lavender room with its window seat overlooking the gardens, Thomas in his room decorated with tiny cars and stuffed animals. Lucien read them both stories with voices for all the characters. Evelyn sat in the doorway and watched, memorizing the moment. When the children were asleep, they retreated to their own bedroom. The master suite had been remodeled again over the years, softened with personal touches that made it feel like home instead of a showroom. Photos on the nightstand. Books stacked on Evelyn's side. Lucien's reading glasses on his. The small, normal details of a life shared. Lucien pulled Evelyn close as they lay in bed, her head on his chest, his heartbeat steady under her ear. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what? For coming back. For staying. For giving me a chance to be something other than what I was." His arms tightened around her. "For giving me a family. We gave each other a family." Evelyn pressed a kiss over his heart. "And we're going to protect it. Together. For as long as we're breathing. Deal." Outside, Chicago sprawled beneath the night sky. Somewhere in that city, other dangerous people made dangerous plans. Other empires rose and fell. Other families broke apart under the weight of violence and secrets. But inside the Ashford estate, behind reinforced walls and sophisticated security systems, two broken people and their children slept soundly. Not because they were safe from the world, but because they'd learned how to be dangerous enough to protect each other from it. And sometimes, just sometimes, that was enough. The rain had stopped, the storm had passed. And in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, Evelyn Vale Ashford closed her eyes and dreamed of ordinary tomorrows. Because after everything they'd survived, ordinary felt like victory. And she'd spent long enough running from happiness to recognize it when it finally found her.